So why?
I just, yeah, it's kind of hard. I like this.
Yeah, that's the paper version. It's up on the wall over there. Yeah.
Is that something you and your fans select?
No, we did it. Yeah. We went through training a year ago. It's a pretty good method. Top facilitation method.
How are you?
I just trying to do things right. So if we were to request a few minutes before, do I give that to you? It says I give it to you or the city manager?
You should probably give it to the city manager.
Okay.
But we have workshops.
I know, it's not till the after. I'm here to sit in on the
Here's
workshop.
a book.
So as long as I just get it to her before the meeting, we're
Yeah.
basic.
Yes.
Yep.
There's a bunch of examples.
No,
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah. We're doing
Far from
interviews.
the premises. Yeah.
We're doing interviews 5:30 to 6:30, right?
No, starting at 6:30, we're going to interview. Marsh Lake Road's 5:30.
Oh, Marsh Lake Road's 5:30? I thought the interviews were 5:30. I had it backwards. I need that.
I haven't stopped.
No.
Sorry.
And you probably want to get paid for your services.
I-
So I've got a couple forms. One's the I-9 form. So
Feel free to sit up front.
point, we have
Hi.
sometime between now and next week.
Oh, good.
I don't know if you have a passport. Otherwise, I would need your first and a driver's license.
Yes, I think I have a passport.
Okay. Otherwise, the passport looks great. Just need a copy of that.
Okay.
I-9.
So today's Sunday. If that is.
Okay, because here's the thing, you do have an option of, you could either do a deduction for social security, or you can do deduction to care. How that works. I'll leave this to you. If you have any questions.
Very good.
I need a coat.
We're doing the Marsh Lake at 5:30 to 6:30.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And who's going to be presenting?
Me.
Okay. And typically, we don't have public comment, at least that I can remember, because this is really for the council to interact with staff in a public manner, right? Related to the project.
Yeah. But if we get through it fast enough and they want to make a few comments, as long as it's not butting against your 6:30 timeline. I don't know how long it'll take me to get through it.
Ms.
Okay, because I know at
Jewett,
6:30 is when we start the interview, 6:30 to 70.
Correct.
30-minute blocks for reviews, and then the council meeting at 7:30,
Yeah,
right?
so then they'd have to wade through that if they want to
Full capacity.
say something, so.
Someone asked me, I said, generally, we don't do that, but the council meeting in the open
Right.
session.
Yep.
So if we have time, given that this is recorded,
Now, if we,
give them time, but I don't know if there's people that are now waiting to come at 7:30. I don't want
Right,
to take that
right,
opportunity away from them.
definitely. Yep,
you allocate,
Yep. So we'll play it by ear.
and,
that works. I don't know how,
and those dollars
I just,
are specific. Yeah, they're not.
Well, yeah, they can be moved to any project. It's gonna be a county state highway.
All right.
We can use gas tax money.
Okay,
Are the others
When
not?
the plan's approved.
I don't know.
Eligible right now.
okay.
Lori indicated that
We haven't gotten that far yet.
was running about 10 to 15.
No, but it's a done deal. We've got the approval contingent on the
She
plan,
didn't say anything.
on a design being done at some day.
Probably.
From whose perspective?
Probably.
The state.
The state.
You have to go, every time you want to add, you can add to your mileage, similar to
Okay.
MSA mileage.
You'll,
We're gonna get going.
Okay, folks. Let's go ahead and get going. We have a workshop tonight, 13 March 2017. The council's going to talk about the Marsh Lake Road project. We know Councilmember Striegel is running a little bit late, but we expect him to join us. We haven't heard from Councilmember Crowley, but given that this is a workshop, and we have limited time, let's go ahead and begin. So, Kara, if you would, please.
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of tonight's workshop is to share with the City Council the latest information on the Marsh Lake Road project. This information has been previously shared with residents who live along the roadway, but we thought it was important for the City Council to have the same set of information, particularly if you haven't already, but are being contacted with residents, providing feedback on what they've seen so far. So the goal will be to go through a little bit of history and then outline where we are in the preliminary design process. So in addition to myself, Lyndon Robgent from Carver County is here, Scott Smith from Carver County. They're both here to answer any questions you might have after I'm through the presentation, and then Matt Hansen from SRF, our consultant on the project, is here as well. So with that, I will get started. Just briefly, I'm not going to spend all night on history, but I want to spend a little bit of time going over the history of this project. Marsh Lake Road was identified as a future county road in historical Carver County and city comprehensive plans. And as development started moving into the area, everyone identified that it was important to begin the process to identify the long-term right-of-way needs and access spacing guidelines for the roadway. So in 2014, the county began that process. They did some preliminary analysis looking at existing soil conditions and then trying to start to identify the right-of-way needs, typical section, and access spacing guidelines. In 2015, the county prepared an initial layout for the corridor for a long-term view of it. This was prepared internally by county staff, and it identified a 4-lane divided roadway with a median in alignment with historical comp plan information. That also included 150 feet of right-of-way. That preliminary information was shared with the public in a neighborhood meeting in April of 2015. Again, then, throughout 2015, we were continuing to discuss the project as a priority. And then in March of 2016, the City Council approved a joint powers agreement with Carver County, at which time preliminary design was authorized with SRF Consulting. So that was just about a year ago, coming up on next week. So we've been working through the preliminary design process since then. And so the focus of what we want to share with the council tonight is just what some of the conclusions that have currently been reached in the preliminary design process. We're not asking the council to make any decisions tonight. We're just trying to get you background information for where we are in the process. What's important to note is the word process is important. These things evolve over time from where they first start back in 2014 to where we are today. So information changes often based on different factors that are being concluded through the preliminary design process. So what you're getting tonight is a snapshot of where we are today. It is by no means the end of the preliminary design process. It's a snapshot of things today, certainly subject to change as we continue to receive feedback and work through the process. So these are a few of the slides that were shown to the neighbors on previous meetings with the neighborhood. But as the council has heard before, long-term this road is slated to be County Road 14. So while it's a city-led process right now, ultimately it is a county road project that we're working towards. One of the first things the consultant did was take a look at the traffic projections. So SRF, our consultant for the project, also does the traffic modeling for Carver County as a whole. One of the things they determined was that a 2-lane would be adequate for today's needs through 2040, and that was determined using basic Met Council 2040 projections and assumptions. So they were using the best 2040 data that they had at that time that they were first working on preliminary design based on information provided by Met Council. The city did provide some input on the assumptions within that model. Ben went through and identified where we anticipate development potentially to occur in the area, so south of Marsh Lake Road and west of the current city limits. The result of that traffic analysis was that an estimated traffic volume in 2040 of 14,700 cars. Some of the assumptions that were included in that model was that County Road 18 would be extended through to Chanhassen. So this model is looking at the overall area of the city, and that the new County Road 14 would be extended through to Waconia in that same time frame. So even though the estimates of traffic were sitting at about 14,700, which is adequate for a 2-lane road, the county expressed an interest to continue to preserve right-of-way for the 4-lane road, so that in years beyond 2040, there would be adequate right-of-way to expand to 4 lanes. And then they also wanted us to take a look at how to most efficiently expand that roadway to 4 lanes should that become necessary. One of the things we've talked about is that when the county is looking at constructing roads like this, they're really looking at something that's going to last much, much longer. So you take Rolling Acres Road, for example, that was constructed 50 years ago, and here we are 50 years later with a road that has more traffic on it than it can currently handle in its current configuration. So the county's goal is to come up with something that's going to serve the residents of Carver County for a much longer period of time. And certainly Lyndon could speak to that if you had specific questions about those goals. So during that time where we were working on what was needed, we started taking a look at what the ultimate right-of-way needs were. So if you recall, I stated earlier that the county had identified back in 2014, 2015, 150 feet of right-of-way needed for the corridor. What you'll see now on this screen is that we're currently looking at 130 feet of right-of-way for the corridor. So that number has been reduced from 150 feet to 130 feet. Part of how that was accomplished was that the 150 feet of right-of-way allows for trails on both sides of the corridor within county right-of-way. The city identified that we didn't think it was necessarily likely that we would have a trail on the south side of the road as well as the north side of the road. If there's a trail on the south side of the road, there's a good chance that it would be more of a local trail connection that might meander through the neighborhood, given the, I'll go back here, given the close proximity of Marsh Lake through here, would be challenging to bring another trail through that section. So the right-of-way was reduced to 130 feet. On December 1st, we presented a typical section to the residents that was quite similar to what is shown here. So we have a 2-lane divided roadway with a wide median in the middle. So starting on the north side of the road, there'd be a trail, a green boulevard area, 1 lane of traffic, a median, and then an eastbound lane of traffic, followed by another boulevard. At the December 1st meeting, some of these dimensions were different. This area was wider than what's shown here. All in all, there was about 8 feet more of pavement. That after the December 1st meeting, the designers talked with Carver County and determined that that overall pavement width could be reduced to what's shown here. So this layout, as it sits today, is what was most recently presented to the residents along the corridor. So again, 5 foot of green space from the right-of-way line, a 10-foot trail, that would be a regional trail, a 15-foot boulevard, followed by a 12-foot through lane with an 8-foot shoulder. So this would allow cars to move through the roadway, but if for some reason a vehicle was stalled and was pulled over on the side of the road, traffic could still get through in that case. 41-foot wide median, and then repeating the same thing on the south side of the road minus this trail. This trail, again, as noted, wouldn't be constructed at this time with the current project. The median, so it's important to talk a little bit about why this is here. So it's a 41-foot wide median that would allow for it to be reduced in width should the road be expanded to 4 lanes in the future. So at a future point in time, you would have another lane here and another lane here and still have a median left in the middle. So 4-lane divided roadway with a median at some point in the future. Under the county's current policy, though, with this 41-foot wide median, the city would have the opportunity to complete some landscaping within that median in accordance with the county's policy. So the landscaping would need to be maintained by the city. We would plan to irrigate that median so that we would have water in order to help that landscaping stay intact. And certainly any questions you might have about what that landscaping could look like could be addressed by Ben. This section down here on the bottom is the same as what you see on the top, except it shows what the roadway would look like at an intersection where we would have a turn lane, a through lane, and a right turn lane. So it's essentially the same as what's up here, but this is just how it would look in an area where we would have turn lanes. So the next page shows some information about the preliminary horizontal alignment for the roadway. So to date, quite a bit of time has been spent by the design team coming up with what that preliminary alignment would need to be. Based on factors such as looking at houses along the roadway, as well as trying to create safer curves from what is currently out there that would meet county state aid standards for roadway construction. There was quite a bit of tweaking that was happening in this area of the project. I don't expect you to be able to zoom in on these details here, but it's more just meant to show you that a couple of different options were evaluated on this side of the project. One of the steps completed during the preliminary design phase was a wetland delineation of all the wetlands adjacent to the corridor. There's a wetland in this area, so pushing the alignment further to the north is an attempt to try to minimize the impacts to a wetland in this area. In talking with folks from Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, there was also some interest on their part to try to minimize whatever impacts the roadway might have on Marsh Lake Road from a water quality perspective. So that's some changes that have been made in there. Additionally, in response to feedback from the neighbors after the December 1st meeting, so in addition to the public neighborhood meetings we have, the city certainly has been open and willing to meet one-on-one with any property owners along the corridor who wanted to meet to talk about it. Through that discussion, the property owner who lives in this house right here indicated that he was going to be pursuing a purchase agreement on this property here with the hope that the road could be realigned to move the impact of the road further onto this property, thereby minimizing the impact on his property. So we've received word from this underlying landowner that that purchase agreement has been made. So there's a draft realignment of the roadway where the road is impacting a house on the north side of the road, but that is with feedback from the would-be property owner to accomplish that goal. So that was changed through there. As part of that discussion, that shifted some more roadway impacts onto this landowner on the south side of the road, which would be the Marsh Lake Hunt Club. We've had an opportunity to chat with the Hunt Club about those impacts, and they're well aware of what's happening. Some additional changes that have been made to the horizontal alignment relate to this property down at this end. Through meetings with this landowner, there's some significant trees located in this area that provide a nice buffer from the roadway to the property owner. So we looked at the possibility of shifting the roadway further to the north to try to preserve those trees. That does increase the impact on property also owned by this landowner on the north side of the road because additional right-of-way would need to be acquired along there. Now, I'm not looking for you to provide any specific reaction to those alignment details, but I did just want to highlight that these things do tend to evolve through the process as we go through. So where things are today, based on what work's been completed today, this is what the anticipated project scope would look like. With 130 feet of right-of-way, 2-lane divided roadway with a median in the middle, 41-foot wide median, turn lanes at any local road connections. I skipped over this, but through the traffic analysis, it was determined that a roundabout would be warranted right away at the intersection of Marsh Lake Road and County Road 11. So we would anticipate that roundabout construction would be included in an initial project. On the west end, the intersection doesn't currently meet warrants for a roundabout. But we wanted to take a look at how a roundabout might fit into the layout in the long run, should that be become what would be recommended for that intersection. Alternatively, it would just be a regular T intersection, which is what we would anticipate being constructed with the initial construction in whatever year we construct it. Trail along the north side of the road is included in the current scope, and then median landscaping. What hasn't been determined yet is any sort of stormwater management features. So this project would require stormwater permits from Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, Carver County WMO, as well as the state of Minnesota. Those permits would require treatment facilities to be constructed along the corridor, likely outside of the 130 feet of right-of-way. Analysis of that work won't occur until we've settled on what the typical section and horizontal alignment would look like for the corridor. So that's work to be forthcoming. So this information, as noted, has been presented to the residents. We received feedback from them over a series of meetings. At the last meeting on March 8th, we elected to bring the residents through a focused conversation, which is a similar experience the council has had recently. The results of those efforts are hanging on the wall behind you, but they were also transcribed into a document that was included in your council packet. So certainly you should take a look at that information, and I certainly expect that you'll be hearing directly from the residents. We provided them with your council email address for all of you, and they know how to find you, I think. What I would say is just overall, if I were to make an overall sentence about the feedback we've received, the residents are expressing concern for this roadway being a major east-west corridor and all the subsequent things that result from it being a major east-west corridor. So 130 feet of right-of-way, a median to provide for it to be expanded in a 4-lane at a future date. But certainly I'll let them speak for themselves. So in terms of where we are in the process, so we were at this step right here of preliminary design where we were holding the council workshop. And what we had contemplated most recently within the last month or so was that maybe sometime in April we would be back in front of the city council to get council action on the typical section as well as the horizontal alignment. So we don't want to keep moving through the preliminary design process because that costs money if there isn't support at a council level for the typical section and the horizontal alignment. But given the questions that have been raised by the residents in chatting with Carver County, we think we need to insert some additional time here to review and respond to the questions that have been raised by the residents. So I don't have a good gauge of how much additional time we will need to work through those questions. That's certainly information that we're chatting with the county and our consultant about to understand how much time we might need to work through some of those things. But we wouldn't be coming back to the city council until some point in the future. I don't think it would be April, based on the fact that it's March 13th. I can say it would be later than April, fairly confident of that. In terms of what lies ahead, once we have consensus on the alignment and the typical section, the consultant would still need to develop a stormwater management plan. The consultant would still need to determine the preliminary vertical alignment for the road. So how are we dealing with the vertical curves along the roadway? After that time, we'd be looking for city council review and approval of the preliminary design. After that, then we would look at starting the right-of-way acquisition process and the final design process. So given the amount of work that's left, we had historically talked about a construction schedule beginning in spring of 2018. That's no longer possible based on where we are today. I think the earliest for construction we'd be looking at would be 2019. It's difficult to predict how long that right-of-way acquisition process could take, so that's why I'm saying 2019 at the earliest. So certainly tonight, we're here to answer any questions that the council has about this information that's being shared with you. And then I guess I'm just looking for head nods that there's agreement from the council that we should, in fact, take additional time to review the questions raised by the residents before we bring this back to you based on where it sits today. And with that, I will take questions.
Gentlemen?
Okay. Since we are in the very early stages of this process, I'd like to just take a step back, and if you could give me a satellite view of the whole area, if that would be possible. Just not that picture, but a regular satellite.
Oh,
GIS?
current.
Just take a look at the whole area in general and traffic patterns. If you look at from Tellers Road down 43, the traffic pattern there is about 740 cars. North of Tellers Road, we're looking at about 1,300 cars. If you go over to the east end, over by 14 Pioneer Trail, toward the east end where it goes to the roundabouts, we're looking at about 3,200 cars. So a lot of capacity unused yet in this area. So if we did nothing, there's still a lot of capacity down there. But if you go more towards the central part of Victoria, up towards Highway 5, County Road 11, we're looking at 8,800 cars going into Highway 5. Bavaria Road currently is about 7,400 cars, and Highway 5 is about 26,000 cars. The capacity of Highway 5 is about 16,000, so we're way over capacity on Highway 5. And it's not getting any better anytime soon. We've got Whispering Hills coming online at 250 units. We've got Victoria Flats coming online, another 80 units. So all of those are going to add more pressure onto Highway 5. We've got a solution sitting up there, and it's called 82nd Street. 82nd Street from Bavaria Road all the way to 41. It's about the same length as Marsh Lake Road. But I know the arguments. I know we can't do it because Chanhassen says they're not interested. Chanhassen will never be interested in doing that road. Most of that is bordering on the Arboretum. This is a county road. This is a county project. At some point, and I know this will happen, but I'd almost rather see a priority list changed on this. Just my thoughts. There's benefit to other communities, and we could point those out. But at some point, we need the county to kind of be the catalyst to bring all these three communities together. This road needs to be done. If we were to do this road, we would take. I mean, if you look at the traffic patterns on 18 now, there's about 4,300 cars at 18 and Bavaria. And with the 7,400 going up north, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see that this road could, on day one, could possibly carry 5,000 to 7,000 cars on day one, compared to Marsh Lake Road, which is going to be less than 1,000 on day one. Again, priority-wise, I don't know where we sit and how we could ever change that, but there's a lot of benefit there. And the Arboretum,
discussions?
we're in the preliminary stages, Councilman Crowley, and I just wanted to just take a step back and just look at the overall area and decision-making process, and I just wanted to just take a look at it.
Well, that's fair, and I apologize.
Thank you.
for being late.
The
One-
Arboretum right now, they're set to take in about 500,000 visitors this year. That entrance into the Arboretum is congested. It does cause problems. If we were to build 82nd Street, we could create another entrance into the Arboretum, which would be a big benefit.
You say Chanhassen would never be interested? Why do you say that?
Well, because it would cost them money, and they don't see the benefit. They're always going to have a priority list that would be higher on the list than this street.
My understanding is that from their perspective, when the agricultural land south of the Arboretum develops is when they will upgrade that road. So I don't know that it's
No, I understand
never,
that.
but it's
I
not
understand it. And that-
necessarily on the top of their
Right.
list.
I understand that.
But,
and it will
but I'm
take
also
time.
curious about the
But I didn't finish
idea
Councilman Striegel.
that
If you would
bringing
please,
triple the
pay
traffic.
for the mic,
Excuse me,
please.
could I just finish?
No,
my
you
statement?
interrupted me. Could I please finish?
Gentlemen,
I listen to
gentlemen,
you
one at
all
a
the
time, please.
So, thank you. Appreciate it. And just one more reason why we should consider this. This is the most direct route for Victoria residents, for our students to get to Chanhassen High School. Okay, this is the most direct route, and it's a preferred route for many of them. These are our most inexperienced drivers, and they are driving on a gravel road to and from school every day. To me, that's truly unacceptable. Victoria is one of the most wealthiest communities in the state. Many benchmarks, we are the wealthiest, and we're sending our 16-year-olds on a gravel road to and from school every day. I think we can do better than that. I think as a parent, as a community, as community leaders, we're all kind of in this thing together. We need to provide a safe environment for our kids to grow up. Okay? And that happens from from the second these babies leave the hospital until the day they turn 18. We're all kind of in it together. And I think sending our teenagers on a gravel road to and from school, I think that's dropping the ball a little bit. Bottom line, if we were to build this road, we could take thousands of cars off of Highway 5. We could improve the access into the Arboretum, and we provide a safe route for our kids to and from school.
Councilmember Striegel?
Thank you.
So if I understand your suggestion, it's that we double or triple the traffic on County Road 18 past Holy Family High School with all those inexperienced drivers, and crossing 11, which is already a horrible intersection, and through the backyards of at least dozens of established homeowners. Is that what your recommendation is?
I didn't follow you. 80 from 18 is carrying about 4,300 now.
And you want to turn that into 8,000, 10,000? I don't know. I mean,
Well,
how many
okay,
thousands
so
are coming off of Highway
okay,
5?
but we're talking about Marsh Lake Road also, and in the future that road is slated to carry, by county's estimate, 14,400. So in the future, we're gonna have busy roads everywhere.
Is that a yes or a no? Are you advocating that we take 10,000 cars a day, or however many thousands are coming off
We've
of
already
Highway
have
5?
cars in the area. We have 8,800 cars going
Yes.
down County Road 11, dumping onto Highway 5, which is overcrowded. People are looking for alternative routes. So yes, adding cars to 18 is definitely going to happen. And 18 is a two-lane, two-road capacity up to 14,000. Currently, there's 4,000.
So you're saying there is capacity on 18?
Plenty of capacity.
You're suggesting we more than triple the volume that road carries with no improvements to it. Just want to make sure I understand. I'm asking you to defend or not. I just want to know if that's what you're stating.
Cars will come from Bavaria. They'll
It's
come
kind
from.
of a thumbs up, thumbs down thing. Yes or no?
Please don't try to. This isn't a court of law.
That's the question I asked.
No, cars will come from the north. They'll come from the south. They'll come from the east, as well.
I'm confused. I thought we were here to talk about Marsh Lake.
That's fine. I'm just taking a step back.
We've got a
We're in the
bunch of
early
people here that
process,
talk about
Councilman
Marsh
Crowley,
Lake. Expecting you to talk
and
about
I'm just throwing this out there just to start the process, and I'm curious.
Okay,
Okay,
put
thank
it
you.
on the agenda for a future item so we can talk about what everybody came here to talk about.
Very good. Fair enough.
Yeah, thanks. I understand your comments. I would add one point here, and I did talk to Mayor Denny Laufenberger of Chanhassen specifically about that gravel road. His point of view was, given the arboretums on the north side, there's no economic incentive for Chanhassen to put money into that because there's no development they can get. And Kara, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the south side of that gravel road Chaska?
That's correct.
So when I was talking with the mayor of Chanhassen, he's not opposed to it, but there's no economic benefit to take tax dollars out of their budget to improve a road that none of their residents will be able to benefit from because there clearly is not going to be any development in the Arboretum. But back to Councilman Crowley's point of view, let's get back to Marsh Lake Road. Kara, if you would move the GIS map down there.
Whoa.
Well, there's a different view.
I just hand the mouse to Ben. That's pretty cool.
Councilmember Vogt, did you have any things about Marsh Lake?
Well, I think based on the interest of the residents, it's a good thing that this is being discussed in more detail, and it's probably better that we take our time, but the end result is going to be a later product, and there are other people out there, probably not in this room today, that wanted a quick product, wanted to. It wasn't too long ago there were emails on a lot of the neighborhood sites saying, let's get together and pave Marsh Lake Road, as if we're that simple. So I'm glad to see the interest. The thing that's confusing me a little bit, and maybe the county can help, because I haven't attended all these meetings, is, this started out by the premise that this is going to be a major corridor, east-west corridor. and it's a continuation of Pioneer, and it's going to go into Teller Road, and then we're going to go to Waconia. And of course, we know that Pioneer goes all the way to Eden Prairie. So I'm getting, is it still, as far as the county is concerned, is it still going to be a major east-west corridor, or is it something else? I mean, if you look at Pioneer, one of the residents made the point that there's a railroad track going across right by the roundabout at Pioneer and Bavaria Road. So, thereby reducing speeds, reducing the ability to move traffic. So really, what do we have here? Because the importance of this thing, we really should understand the importance, and we're either wavering on this, or this is a lesser road than we think, or we have a lot more time. Maybe maybe we're talking 50 years out instead of 20. What's the answer? Is this still regarded as a major east-west corridor?
You want to elaborate? Would you mind taking a couple of minutes? The projections that I heard about the 14 to 15,000 cars, what kind of time frame is that? Because based on what Councilmember Gregory said, we're 800 cars now? 300?
300 today. Day one, it'll be about 900 is what projections are.
It's really hard to say, Mayor. I think it's based on the development that happens in the community, what the planning for that would be. We have a model that projects it out. We're thinking that's 2040, but it could be out 5 to 10 years.
Got it.
It depends on how much development occurs.
So given, to Councilmember Vogt's point, we've got the two roundabouts over there in Chaska, and talking with some people up at the county on the Tom Workman, in fact. He and I were talking about this, and it seems that it'd be hugely expensive to try to, if you will, quote unquote, straighten out or put a bridge either under the railroad tracks or around the development in that end to connect in back into Pioneer Trail. And if you look on the west side going over towards Waconia, there's going to be a lot of alignment and property that'll have to be acquired to be able to connect into Tellers Road. So as I look at this, I'm having a hard time understanding how this it probably won't happen in our lifetimes, but maybe at some point in the future it'll actually get to that point. But part of what I struggle with here is on the east side of County Road 11, the road that's already in place today. Is that already, does the county have a right-of-way to put in a 4-lane highway on that side?
No.
So it's only a 2-lane?
Yep.
Okay. So you don't have the additional right-of-way on that end?
What's that?
You don't have the right-of-way?
We don't need anything. The roundabouts are going to stay.
Okay.
We put it on the model to show what the impact of that is. And we still need to improve Marshall.
Right. I wouldn't argue. I'm in favor of improving the road. I just don't know if we need a 4-lane divided highway with a median. I really struggle with the median and the costs the city then has to take to do all of the maintenance and maintain that. And when I look at the projections and the fact that this road, at least to me, seems to be boxed on both ends, why do we want to go ahead and try to get one segment in the middle, 4 lanes with a divided right-of-way, when both ends, we don't have that on either end?
We don't need a 4-lane divided roadway right now.
Okay.
We only need 2-lane.
Do we need a median?
The reason the median is the preferred alternative is we're not coming back.
Sure.
We can't build roads every 20 years anymore. We don't have that kind of money.
Right.
So we want to build something that could be retrofit 30, 40, 50 years from now.
So related to that, on County Road 10, south of this, does the county already have a 4-lane right-of-way to take 10 and turn it from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road?
No.
You do not have those right-of-ways. All right.
Is that your intent, to get there?
Absolutely.
And is the intent of the new model with Marsh Lake and Pioneer west of Bavaria, is that intended to be a feeder to the north-south roads, or is it intended to be a major east-west artery?
Our model shows that people will go down 11 to Engler. That will be the predominant movement rather than going through the town course area.
So Marsh Lake / Pioneer Trail's role is to get people efficiently to 11 and 10 to, and then eventually to 10 and 212.
Plus it provides some relief to Highway 5.
All right, it seems to me that, given the constraints on each side of this, east and west, what we're really trying to do is build a nice road for the development as it continues to move south and west out of Victoria to get cars out to 11, down to 10 or Engler Boulevard, and then out to 212, and not actually convert this into an alternative for Highway 5 or an alternative, for that matter, for County Road 10.
Yeah, I think the timing is the key here.
Right.
When are we going to be ready to do this project? That's what we've got to work with you guys on, figure out the best approach. I think as developments hook up, there's going to be some pressure on that roadway. Something's going to need to be done. So do we do something that's an interim, or do we build something that will last, that we don't have to come back? That's really the option.
Yeah.
So I guess my understanding from the last kind of conceptual discussion about what might be on Marsh Lake Road was to do the sort of straightening, grading, road bed work to make it possible for 4 lanes with no future sort of, easements or anything required, but to just pave it as 2 lanes plus turn lanes? Is that the more short-term vision?
Yeah, but we wouldn't do a project that we would have to come back and spend a bunch of money on again, on the 2-lane. So we wouldn't want to do, we want to look at the life cycle cost of the roadway and spend the least amount of money so that the road meets its expected life.
So are you saying that if we don't want to put in a medium, you don't want to build a road?
Well, we haven't got to that point. Obviously, with the feedback we got, as Kara said before you got here, we need to regroup, figure out what the best options are.
Yeah, because
I can't give you that answer now.
my reaction is, well, twofold. I mean, based upon citizens' feedback, it's clear that the people that live around there don't want a 4-lane highway, and they're not very happy with a median, and I'm being kind, a median in the middle of it. I look at this, I'll say self-servingly, myself as a council member, and we're trying to figure out how to continue the development activities that we have. Gravel road isn't acceptable. It needs to be paved. And I don't like to spend money that doesn't have to be spent. And so, and we went through a workshop a couple of weeks ago where I heard one of the commissioners state that we build an infrastructure that we can't afford. So let's keep that infrastructure cost down. My reaction is let's build a 2-lane highway, continue on what we've got at Pioneer Trail, and continue that same footprint straight through there, get it done as soon as possible. And I have a feeling that's a longer-term road than.
That's fine. If it's an interim solution, the county's not going to pay for it.
But I don't see that as, but that's my point, is I don't see that as an interim solution. I see that, just what you described in terms of where the traffic is going to go down to 10 and it's going to continue on 5. Yes, this will continue, but just the nature of the road as it is today, it's not going to be a 55-mile-an-hour highway all the way to Eden Prairie, because you've got roundabouts there. You've got stoplights going through major commercial areas. And so let's continue with that standard that has already been set by the county. Why change it here for this specific road? And that's, I guess, the answer I'm not getting.
We have to look at that again. I guess there's a difference between a city road standard and a county. Would we look at a section that's similar to the east of 11? I would say no, because if you look at the projected traffic on that, it's 10,000, not 14 to 18. So maybe there's something in between. We just got to figure that out. But there's a significant difference between a county road design and a city. We're not allowed to build city street
Well,
design.
so county, help me understand, county road definition. All right, so this section of Marsh Lake that we call Marsh Lake Road is a county road, or is,
No, now,
Not it.
but that's what we're contemplating?
yeah,
Okay. And the other side of that is not?
yes, it is.
Okay.
Significant traffic, projected traffic difference.
Okay, but why can't we continue what's on the other side? Why do it have to be increased right at County Road 11 to something larger? Why can't it continue with the same footprint as Pioneer Trail?
I thought I just said that there was a difference in traffic between the two.
Where-
One,
That's where I'm
section
not getting
on the
it.
east side will not handle the traffic projected on the west side.
And that's because of the bottlenecks at the roundabouts at Bavaria Road. There's just not that much traffic coming from that side.
So are they
Is
gonna,
Section of
is
the
that
road
correct? Yeah.
And the roadway. And the
So are they gonna
access
come-
spacing. There's lots of variables that go into how a road handles traffic.
so is the anticipation here that people are gonna take this road to 11 and turn south or north?
Correct.
So
That's what the model says.
when we talk about, I guess there's a couple things I'm wondering about. So Councilmember Gregory made comment that 18 today or 82nd Street, as it sits right now, is capable of carrying something like 10,000 cars a day with no design upgrade. That is probably a lesser road today in terms of shoulders and turn lanes and everything else than Pioneer Trail is between Bavaria and 11. Is that's my impression from, I drive them both pretty regularly, so if that's the case, then why is not the County Road 18 type of construction, which I think would be much more acceptable to the good people of Marsh Lake Road, why is that not acceptable there? And then, where is the traffic that's supposed to drive this volume up to 14 or 15,000 coming from? I mean, we certainly don't have that much developable land between our already developed Victoria and 10. And we've got 43 as a north-south feeder. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how you get to those kinds of projections in that sort of short distance, given the developable land.
Yeah, I mean, it's based on, again, projected development. When that happens in Waconia, Lake Town Township, Victoria, we look at the long term, what if it's all done, what needs to happen?
Right.
I wouldn't say that that design you mentioned is off the table. We're gonna regroup and take a look. It's just from our initial thought, it wasn't the right thing to do, but we're gonna reevaluate that. If that makes sense, and the county board can agree to it,
And I don't think we're necessarily being critical as much as we are trying to make sure we understand the variables here.
this one's a very interesting roadway, because it's kind of on the bubble of capacity. If it was gonna be 12 to 13,000, we knew it would never be higher than that. 2-lane undivided is fine. It's just our model's showing that it could trigger that 4-lane need someday. So we wanna build something that we can retrofit very inexpensively, if that ever happens.
And we're all in favor of that. So question for you, and I apologize since I was late if you covered this already, but is the model, how current is it? And I think that was a question also that a lot of the Marsh Lake Road residents had is,
2014 it was done last, but we're updating it right now.
when it was updated in 2014, was it using 2030 comp plan data or raw? Okay, and so I think that may be the disconnect.
But what we did do, as Kara mentioned earlier when you weren't here, was that we took some of the projected development in Victoria that was not necessarily in the comp plan and put that into our sensitivity analysis on the current model. So there was a little bit of other work done other than just the old model.
Right.
But we are updating our county-wide model for 2040. And I think part of the discussions I've had with Kara is we should wait until that's done and see if we're still in the same point.
Do you have timing on that?
Next couple months.
Got it. A real quick question. As a point of reference, east of 11 on Pioneer Trail, these requirements that we were talking about, I believe you said the projection there was 10,000, so smaller. But here on the west side, you're saying because of the projections, you want a 4-lane right-of-way. Did those standards change, and that's why you didn't get a 4-way right-of-way on the east side? Because I thought the long-term plan was this was going to be a major thoroughfare. And the question I have is, on the east side there, if that was the intended purpose, why didn't you get a 4-lane there? And you didn't, but yet now on Marsh Lake Road, you're looking for a 4-lane right-of-way.
Well, the short answer is we didn't own the road, the city of Chaska did. And it was, if you look at our original 2030 compound, it was a 4-lane all the way, the whole thing. So we would come in there and do an expansion project someday and buy the necessary right-of-way. When the recession happened and we retweaked the model, we pushed off the traffic forecast to a further date. That was the 2014 amendment I talked about. We determined, one, we didn't have the money to do it. And could we leave those roundabouts as is because the city wanted to develop that part that's being developed right now? We tried many times to get federal funds through that railroad overpass, couldn't get it. So again, we thought, well, we don't have the funding to do this. What if we just leave it as a 2-lane? So we reran the model, leaving it as a 2-lane, and that's what we've got today. Those are the numbers that we're using for this project.
Is that development that's going in on that northeast corner of Pioneer and Bavaria, does that essentially make this a permanent, never ever going to change, never ever going to go through? It's pretty much, it's a done deal.
However, we do think that piece of Pioneer Trail from the school to the west will be upgraded to 4 lanes.
This,
Where it ends
Uh,
there, that section to the roundabout will
Okay.
be updated to 4 lanes. And we are doing 41 next summer, 2018, from 14 of Pioneer down to 212. We're making that 4 lanes.
Are the rights of way all in place for that one as well at this point? or-
Buying right now.
I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understood that. You're going to take 41 from Pioneer Trail down to 212?
County is the lead, it's a Mendel Road, but we applied for the federal grant, we got it, then we got some TED money, economic development money. And we're doing a 4-lane federal project in 2018.
Is that going to carry it all the way to 169 or just down to 212?
Pioneer Trail to
It's 4-lane all the way, so we
Yeah,
know.
about a mile.
Well, not through downtown Chaska.
Really congested roadways.
All right, based on the discussion, council, is there a consensus that, yes, we should do something with Marsh Lake? And it sounds like the consensus is a 2-lane road, maybe the equivalent of County Road 18 without a median, and that's kind of where we're leaning based on what we know as of today, council? Is that accurate?
Agreed.
I would,
I'd say so.
I'd say so, but I want to be very careful with the wording. And we, in my opinion, we need Marsh Lake Road to be paved, just from a development standpoint. And so to say that is our preference, I guess I would prefer that approach as opposed to, yes, we want it this way, and have you come back and say no. We're in a dialogue. I want to continue that dialogue and understand what your models say.
Yep, fair enough, I agree.
I guess, yeah, my perspective is just that we should, there's some data that's missing in order for us, I think it's not possible for me to say, yeah, do it this way, because the data is either outdated or missing, and so I would want to have a clearer picture of what the real story is before I say, yeah, that's my preferred solution.
And we're going to talk to everybody very soon.
And then,
I think there's an overreaction to the median concept. Is there a creative way of looking at the medians a little differently that gives more flexibility in the short run
Oh, sure.
to the people in the area?
One of the options we will look at is if we think a median is necessary, we could do a smaller one. And one option is if you see that option there, we're building the road on the outside, so that would be locked in. The advantage of
Right.
that is you do all your impacts, your environmental impacts, stormwater now, and you don't have to do it again. One option is you could build it from the middle out. So you could do the 2 lanes in the middle with a smaller median and then someday widen it to the outside. That's another option we're looking at now, which the road would be a lot further away initially from the home.
And how about breaks in the median? More breaks so people could take their
turn into the road, turn
turn.
We have also, we got that comment too, that the access to the homes that are there now would be an issue. So we're looking at, is there an interim solution where they could cross the median
Yes.
until traffic got to a certain level, and we'd want to make sure, I'd want to make sure, being the engineer, that it's as safe as possible. And then we would prevent that from happening at some point.
But I can see where a median can actually be aesthetically, more of a parkway appearance, breaks up the traffic a little bit, as long as the overall footprint doesn't make the road,
Right.
overall footprint of the road huge.
Yeah, and the reality is, all my experience is a median right-of-way is by far safer than an undivided.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason we were exploring that.
So I'm going to ask a question. But I don't want to throw another wrench in this, but was there any discussion about a roundabout at Pioneer and County Road 11?
Other than it was on the
There is a planned
map.
roundabout.
Yeah.
There is there?
Yep.
You came in literally like right after.
Okay.
So included in the initial scope would be a roundabout at this location. Though shown here, this isn't anticipated to be included in the initial scope.
Thank you. So it's not a wrench. Thank you.
All right, final comments. We're running out of time. Council?
We're here to work with you guys, so we'll do
Okay.
whatever.
Thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Gentlemen, thanks for your time. Appreciate your input. We'll go ahead and take a few minute break, and then we'll start the interview process. Thanks, everybody.
I'm not staying. I'm not staying.
Okay.
The interviews. I'm gonna go see my kid play for 5 minutes.
Okay.
He's over at Velocity. Yeah. Their names around to start with.
Oh, okay. Ben, good for you. How many people do we need to get there?
How many do we need? I don't know much about finance.
Okay. I'll ask them. All right, Greg.
Hi, Ben. That was so much.
Sorry, distracting.
Okay. Hi, Tom. I missed it too, but I got recommended. I'm not sure, actually. It's a different council.
Is
They're always fun. I remember a work obligation, I was like, whatever, sweet. And I remember saying the national anthem, and then I turned and stopped, and then they were like, time to go. I'm like, I never actually started it.
I don't know.
Like that was such a fun time.
No.
applications that are
Thank you. You have a couple folks that want to speak during open forum.
Is that what these others are?
Yep. 4 total you should have now?
Yep. Council meeting is not until 7:30, and that's what was posted, correct?
Correct. Yep.
This is just another workshop,
Yes.
and it was posted?
Yes.
All right, and this is not being recorded because it's interviews, correct?
I'm just recording everything. So it is.
Derek's not here? Did we hear from Derek?
Yes, Derek is not able to make it this evening.
He's not?
So much like John, they would both still like to be considered.
Both Derek and John? Folks, everyone, can I have your attention? Let's get started here. We're going to do interviews for candidates for the city's finance committee. 2 individuals, Derek Gunderson and John Iverson, are not able to make it tonight. But Laura, you said both are still interested in serving on the committee. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay, so we have 4 individuals here. What I'd like to do is like what we did with the previous interviews. I've got a list of questions that I'm going to ask each of the candidates, if you will, and we'll just start with Greg and take turns answering first. These questions are to benefit for the council put together by staff, and if each of you would just take a few minutes, given that we have limited time, to just provide your thoughts. So let's begin. Greg, if you would go first. The first question for all 4 of you is, please provide a short introduction about yourself and what about serving on Finance Committee interests you the most.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to sit before you tonight. My name is Greg Adamski. I've been a resident of Victoria for 15 years. I moved here from the Chicago area to take a job with U.S. Bank, where I'm the Senior Vice President in charge of interest rate risk management of all the bank's residential 1 to 4 family loans that are sold in securitized form to in capital markets to Wall Street. So towards that end, my background in terms of finance, in terms of capital markets and exposure to interest rates and whatnot, have served me well because I've been on finance committee since 2009. I've worked with Kelly and Jim Crowley, Tom Striegel, Tom Vogt, and Mr. Gregory for a term, a couple meetings, and then of course Laura. So I've got a good tenure with the finance committee. I've enjoyed the time that I've spent. The concepts are engaging, the benefit to the city, and understanding for me personally of what's going on is a great place to be plugged in and tied in. And I enjoy being able to come and contribute to the community that I've lived in and enjoyed living in and watched grow over the past 15 years.
Okay, thank you. Christopher?
Good evening, Christopher Renander. I've lived in Victoria now for 3.5 years. Moved here with my family, and I have been a certified public accountant for the past 14 years. I've worked in public accounting, held treasury positions well as been involved in budgeting and planning in corporate finance. And the experience and opportunity to be part of the finance committee is intriguing to me because I do see myself as somebody who wants to give back to the community. And with my experience and background, I think I could add a lot to the team. And the opportunity to be a part of this community as it continues to grow and evolve is something that I find really interesting and exciting and would like to be a part of.
Okay, thank you. John?
Thank you, council members. My wife Nancy and I have been residents of Victoria for 16 years. Prior to that, we lived in Chanhassen for 14 years. Our two daughters are both graduates of Chaska High School. Also, I should say I'm Johnny, graduate of St. John's University, but I would ask you not to hold that against me. In terms of a career, before I semi-retired several years ago, I worked for the American Cancer Society, the Midwest Division, which is a corporation, 501c3 nonprofit. And in that role, I served as the chief operating officer. We had a staff of 400 people, very people-intensive, less capital-intensive than the city, and was intimately involved in all the strategic activities of the organization, including everything from our revenue generation, which was exceeded $40 million, and obviously in terms of our strategic planning and in terms of our budgeting process. And I feel like serving in the role in the finance committee would give me an opportunity to leverage some of that professional experience that I've had and carry that over to the benefit, hopefully, of the city and of support to the council, which has a lot on its shoulders. I've enjoyed the opportunity to get hooked into being involved with the city. It's reminiscent to me of a lot of volunteers that we worked with in our organization on our board that would say, they got hooked both lay and professional volunteers. And I feel some of that with the city, and I think the finance is such a critical component that I would welcome that opportunity. I know that Callie Grinnell and the finance operations are impeccable, so I'm not here to fix anything, but I would welcome the opportunity to help contribute to some of the tough work that still has to be done. It's very dynamic.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, hi, I'm Joe Doherty. I've lived in Victoria for the past 8 years. Prior to that, I was up in Maple Grove. I'm a certified public accountant. My license currently is inactive. I've got 38 years of diverse accounting and finance experience, including 11 years in public accounting. I headed an internal audit for a public company for 2 years, and I ran a foundry for 2 years. Currently, I'm a CFO of a contract manufacturer of personal care products that we have facilities in Chaska and Eden Prairie. And in addition to my finance duties, I also oversee IT and HR. Over the 12 years as a company, we're able to grow from 20 million in revenue to 150 million. So I'm used to dealing with growth and financing to fund that growth. Basically, I'm here because I'd like to give back to the community. And I think my unique perspective in terms of being both having line responsibility and financial background could be a benefit to the city.
Thank you. The next question, Christopher, we'll start with you. Have you ever served on a public board in Victoria or for another community? If so, what experiences from that position do you feel would be beneficial to the Finance Committee?
I have not served on a public board in the past. This is my first opportunity to have a chance to. So I'm excited at the opportunity, but I don't have any prior experience in doing it.
Okay, thank you. John?
Well, the thing that comes to mind for me is we're members of St. Victoria here in Catholic Church, but in Chanhassen, we were very active in St. Hubert's community, and I served on our parish council. And so your question is, what did I take away from that experience?
Yes.
Just the importance of the responsibilities in representing the best interests of
Perfect, thank you. Joe?
All right, I don't know if it qualifies as public, but I was president, secretary, and treasurer of Lake Ridge Homeowners Association for 2 years. So, yes, and then I've been on various nonprofit boards and industry-related boards and pension funds over my career.
Thank you. Greg?
My previous experience with being in the city capacity is having been on the finance committee since 2009. So been able to see the city grow and develop and be led in different ways over the years, and have seen the up cycles and I've seen the down cycles and how we've been able to prudently manage through both good times and difficult times in the city and still be able to deliver the quality of service that Victoria residents have grown used to and enjoy and want to continue to see.
Perfect, thank you. Next question, John, if you would. What expertise or education do you have that would be beneficial in making recommendations on policy projects to the city council?
I would say that the work that I've done with American Cancer Society, I attended the finance committee last time. I've looked at documents online, looked at the minutes, and, as I guess, just through my work experience, multi-year, needing to develop policies, procedures, standards. I think dealing with personnel, significant personnel issues, utilization of metrics and best practices, dealing with both revenue growth but also with revenue declines. I think it's a real world and very significant experience.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I'm going to say basically it's been a long time since I've been in school. So I mean, basically, years of work experience, years of board experience. Currently, we're 3 years into lean journey and implementing lean manufacturing processes. I think through those processes and development of standard work and metrics and that might be an area that might benefit the city and help move things forward.
Thank you. Greg?
In terms of policy, I think it can bring a broad degree of experience, having certainly been at U.S. Bank for 15 years. Regulated financial institutions are no strangers to having a myriad of different policy. On a day-to-day basis, I'm face oversight from 5 different separate regulatory authorities that are coming and asking questions about what I do. So policy is certainly formulated there. During my time in the finance committee, we spent an extensive amount of time revamping a myriad of financial policies, the debt management policy, the cash disbursement policy. Off the top of my head, I can't even remember all the ground we've covered over the past years. Additionally, I'm also a graduate student at the University of Washington in an executive management program at U.S. Bank, where essentially we are tasked with learning what good policy looks like. So from that standpoint, I have and believe I've contributed massively to the policies that we have and we continue to do so, bring that risk management framework and just refine it even more than we've done. You've done a great job.
Thank you. Christopher?
What I would be able to bring to the council would be a risk management framework from my time as a CPA in public accounting, where most of my clients were Fortune 500 companies in the Twin Cities here, specifically United Health Group, which is a highly regulated company. And then subsequent to that, I currently work at Digital River, which is a technology company, and we've gone through, in the finance team there, my experience is a lot of unique instances. So, for instance, in my treasurer role, I've managed $300 million of corporate debt. We also invested a few $100 million in investments, and also have had opportunities to work in some large, complex integration deals that I think would be good examples of the complexity that the financial creativity I think I could bring to the role as well.
Thank you. Next question. We're going to run out of time, folks, so all of you, if you would, if you can shorten your answers, I'd appreciate it. The next one is, Joe, we'll start with you. Is there a particular area of the city's finances that you're interested in?
I'm interested in the risk management.
Thank you. Greg?
The area of interest for me is helping the city with any capital markets questions that go back to bond issuance or refunding the existing bonds that we have currently outstanding.
Perfect. Thank you. Christopher?
I think for me would be looking at making sure that advising the council on what we can do to strive towards the long-term financial health of the
Okay. Thank you. John?
I wouldn't single out any one area. I think one thing I've attempted to do is to really get to see the depth and breadth of the issues, opportunities, challenges, et cetera, that the city has. And so to not look at the role of finance committee strictly from the numbers and dollars and cents, which it certainly is, but to look at it from the standpoint of a council member or from the staff in terms of all the tugs and pulls that come into play. And if we had more time, I could certainly state those, but you know what they are as I'm speaking, so.
Perfect. Thank you. Last questions. Greg, let's start with you again, if you will. Are there any particular circumstances where you would need to abstain from discussion? Christopher?
nothing more.
John? Joe? Okay. Last question. Christopher, we'll start with you. Any other thoughts or insights that would be beneficial for the council for consideration?
I recognize that my experience is a bit unique in that I haven't served on a council before. It's something that I'm truly passionate about, and I think I could bring some unique things or some thoughts and perspectives to the council, and ideally assist the council in driving towards what's best long term for the city.
Thank you. John?
I'm a strong believer in the use of metrics, best practices, but particularly measuring yourself against other whatever is the most appropriate, whether it's within the industry or whether it's outside of our industry. So, for example, measuring ourselves against other cities, but perhaps even going beyond that. I think, and I'm not saying that's done in most stuff, but I think that's an area that I particularly find of value.
All right. Thank you. Joe?
I think my unique background, I think I can be valuable support to Kelly, Lori, and the council, and help the city and move forward.
Thank you. Greg?
I think that one good aspect that can bring is continuity, that as having been through the long line of various council members and mayors over the time that I've been here, and then certainly there's been a fair number of other resident members of the committee over the years, that being able to have bring perspective of what the past looked like so that we can make good decisions about the future.
Thank you. At this point, let me open up for the council for any other follow-up questions.
No questions.
No questions? Lori, remind everyone, including myself, we're appointing 3 people tonight?
Yes, Mayor. Traditionally, we've had 2 or 3 citizen representatives on this committee, and Mr. Ravansky was appointed to a 1-year term last year to help with some staggering, and we had 2 vacancies throughout the year. So we would be looking for 2 3-year terms and 1 2-year term to keep that staggering in place.
Okay, council, we have a few minutes before the next interviews for the Planning Commission. Discussion on, to see if we can get a consensus so that we could actually vote on it when we get to the council meeting. Any thoughts?
Can we have that discussion during the meeting,
Yes, we can. Would you prefer?
please?
All right, let's delay that discussion until the council meeting then. Gentlemen, thank you all for not only being willing to volunteer and serve, I appreciate you guys coming in here tonight, and if you want to stick around, the council will make the decision later tonight. So all of you, thank you very much for spending the time and volunteering to help the city.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
We're going to take 5 to 10 minutes here, and then we'll start the next set of interviews.
Keep up the good work.
Well, you know, you see the paper, you can't they be broken, right?
Kelly's put a lot of hard work into getting that.
I don't know if you need to. It's gonna be a bit like making sausage. Do you?
I'm gonna get
Thank you, sir.
Robert Wolf is not here yet.
Not that I didn't want to see.
Were you talking to him? Okay. Sorry. Sorry.
I haven't heard that he wouldn't be here either, so I'm not sure. Correct.
Did he say we're just going for two guys? And two our incumbents.
I wasn't aware of that. I think this is one. No, no, he's in.
For the planning commission, two people in?
No, there's four.
What do you
Derek wasn't gonna be able to be here, he applied again to serve, and then, I'm not sure.
We haven't heard from Robert.
I was trying to get Ben's attention. I have not, but
I have not.
Cindy. Okay, sounds good.
Did Derek say why he wasn't going to make it?
Yeah, his daughter threw up as soon as she got off the school bus.
Oh.
They had kid conflicts.
Here's checking with Ben on Robert.
Ben has not heard. Cindy is checking through her email quick to make sure. She was the one that set up the interviews. It looks like no. We have not heard.
All right. All right, folks, let's get going here. The gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. The way that we're going to do this is I have a list of questions I'm going to ask ask on behalf of the council. If you would take a few minutes to provide us your response. And it looks like we've got some additional questions here, so if you could keep your answers a little bit short so we have some time at the end for additional questions. So, Tom, let's start with you. First question is, please provide a short introduction about yourself and what about serving on the Planning Commission interests you the most?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, Council, good evening. Tom Trickus. Been in Victoria, lived in Victoria for the last 12 years. Moved in 2005 from New Haven, Connecticut, where I relocated back to Minnesota, where I was born and raised and lived in Golden Valley when I was younger. I'm currently director at United Health Group within their Innovation Research and Development Department. I manage a team of software engineers and designers, and we're developing new products in the healthcare space for United Health Group. Been serving on the Planning Commission now for the last little over 2 years. I was appointed when there was a vacancy, so I served full term, but I did serve this a little bit over 2 years. I've very much enjoyed my time with the commission. It's a great group of people. We're facing a lot of really interesting challenges in the city, some great opportunities in the city. Over the last 12 years, I've seen the city change significantly, and it's been a privilege, quite honestly, to be part of it for the last couple of years. I have a very strong interest in maintaining my involvement with the commission. We have a lot of opportunity with the growth of the downtown, with the upcoming comprehensive plan that we're working on. We've got so many great assets from a natural resource perspective and needs from a housing perspective that I feel as if my experience on the commission as well as my professional experience can come and be a benefit to that. Prior to working for United Health Group, I did spend time for a Switch software company doing software engineering, but I also, before that, worked as an urban planner in Connecticut, where I spent 6 years doing plans of conservation and development, which are the equivalent to the comprehensive plan, but in Connecticut. I was an ASCP certified planner, worked extensively with commissions across the country, helping them with development projects. So I have a fair amount of depth and experience working within a planning environment, so I think that brings some value to the city.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mr. Mayor, Council, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of the team here. I've been a resident of Carver County since 1993. I moved into the city of Chaska. I worked for the Carver County Sheriff's Office, and I recently moved to the city of Victoria, July of last year. We live over here in Spider Lake condominiums, and absolutely love it here. We're kind of empty nesters now, so trying to downsize and simplify a little bit, and so the house in Chaska moved here. I've worked with city councils, all the city councils, all the townships throughout the county. In my role as commander of police contracting, I go around and try and sell police contracting to you folks and help you understand what policing is needed. I patrolled this city and other cities in Carver County in the 90s, and to see how this city has grown since 1993 just really intrigues me, and I think the folks here who have been before you and are here now have done a wonderful job of building this community. I'd really like to be a part of that and build it and try and entice businesses and residents to come here. There's some great amenities out here, and I think we can really make this a great destination for people to come here.
Thank you. Next question, Jeff, if you would begin. Have you ever served on a public board in Victoria or for another community? If so, what experiences from that position do you feel would be beneficial to Victoria?
I have not served on any public positions. However, I have worked closely, like I said, in my time as contract manager for the sheriff's office with city councils and townships. And it just amazes me to see how dedicated folks like you are to the community and making it a better place to live. And I would really appreciate being part of that team.
Thank you. Tom?
Outside of the current experience on the commission, I did serve on the Victoria's Citizen Advisory Committee during the last comprehensive plan update. So that was the other experiences I had.
Thank you. Tom, if you would start this one. What expertise or education do you have that would be beneficial in making recommendations on policies, projects to the city council?
Great question. So as I mentioned before, I did serve as a consulting planner back when I lived in Connecticut. So I spent 6 years working quite extensively developing zoning regulations and policies for cities and towns across New England. So I became very familiar with understanding policies and the implementations of those. So that's that's probably where the depth of my experience would come from.
Thank you. Jeff?
I have extensive experience in the sheriff's office, working in different divisions within the office. And I understand what it takes to lead and to be part of a team and working towards that single goal that we have in mind to accomplish that. The most recent example I can give you is when I took over the investigative unit. There's about 12 of us there. And every time I take over a new unit, I'll go in and I'll sit down with these folks and I'll talk to them. And I'll look at them and I'll say, I don't expect any one of you in here to work for me. And I'll look at them, what are we talking about? I do expect every one of you in here to work with me, because we can accomplish more working with each other towards a common goal and accomplishing the mission goals of the sheriff's office. I think that's what I can bring to this planning commission.
Thank you. Tom, next question. Is there a particular project or type of development you're interested in seeing take place?
Specifically, for me, an interest is down here in the downtown area. I think we've got a great opportunity to really continue to diversify the development that's occurred. With the commercial development coming in, I'd really like to see us be able to attract some really interesting companies to diversify our tax base, to be able to bring in some additional income into the city, to enable us to do even more things within our cities and parks across the city. So I'd like to see that grow. I'd like to see our neighborhoods to continue to grow as well. We're fortunate to have a wonderful network of neighborhoods that are networked with parks and trails, and I'd like to see that continue. I'd also like to see us to continue to diversify the housing that we're bringing into the town as well, to enable residents to stay here. So the single-family homes are great. The large single-family homes are great. They provide good income for the city and a needed product out there. But I also would like to see diversification so we can keep our residents here as they age, as they move on to different stages of their lives, and be able to provide a variety of housing. And I think we've taken some really good steps in moving some of those ideas forward. But if I were to single out one, I'd really like to see Victoria grow commercially and really diversify our tax base.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I would agree. I think bringing additional businesses into the community is going to help the tax base. I think diversifying the housing is a great idea. Like I said, I've seen this place grow, and it's amazing. And I think get this grocery store back up and running, not a bad idea either. And then I guess I would like to figure out if it's Steger Lakes or Steiger Lakes.
German, it's Steger.
Yeah.
We're getting T-shirts, so stand by.
Thank you. Jeff, if you would answer first, please, on this one. What do you believe is an appropriate way to address conflict that may arise when proposals are made that meet city goals and policies, but the public is not supportive of the request?
Well, I've worked as a liaison to the city of Chanhassen, and we worked with a lot of roads that were being constructed and problems within the community. And we would hold open meetings for the public to come to, and we would just talk it through. We would say, what are the problems, and then identify those, and then try and identify resolution to those. And I think a lot of it is just listening and trying to explain why you're doing what you're doing, and they kind of comprehend it and understand that. But it's just listening and working with each other, like I said before, I think we can accomplish so much more.
Thank you, Tom.
Do you mind repeating the question?
What do you believe is an appropriate way to address conflict that may arise when proposals are made that meet city goals and policies, but the public is not supportive of the request?
Thank you. Does that ever happen?
No, never.
It's a great question, and something that we've come to expect on the Planning Commission. We're dealing with people's property, we're dealing with people's interests, and I think the biggest thing that we can do, I would agree with Jeff, is listen, get the feedback, but also to be able to really provide transparency into what our process is, so they kind of fully understand why decisions are being made and how decisions are being made. I think we've had a number of proposals come forward to the Planning Commission that have been controversial. I think keeping the best interests of the city in mind in the process of that, keeping our regulations in mind, and then sound decisions. I think as a commission, to bring forward advice or an advisory decision to you to ultimately make a decision. But I think listening, communication, transparency are key points of that.
Just follow up quick, I think trying to minimize that problem, I think, is transparency. I think we need to be transparent. You know, I've always been an advocate of, you know, building trust through transparency and be as transparent as we can and share what we can with these folks. And I think, you know, that's a lot of what they come in to hear, is that they want to vent, and then you tell them, well, this is what we're doing. If you can do it at the front end, you may avoid some of that.
Thank you. Tom, I believe this one's yours. Next question. Are there any particular circumstances where you would need to abstain from discussion?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Jeff?
Well, the second came up related to the sheriff's office, but that won't be till June 23rd, because I'm retired.
Okay, thank you. Last question, Jeff, if you would take this. Any other thoughts or insights that'd be beneficial for the council to consider?
I guess I'll just talk a little bit about my education. I have a 4-year degree from Mankato State. 3 years ago, I finished my master's degree through St. Mary's University. I thought that would be beneficial. And my experience with the sheriff's office, I think, really lends to this. I understand how city councils and commissions and townships work, and worked with a number of divisions in the sheriff's office, so I understand that, you know, communication is really important here.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, if the names on the plate have anything to do with it, I should be a shoo-in. Maybe you can't handle another Tom in town. Maybe that's not a.
Take a number.
No, I just think that it's been, we've got a really good group going within the commission today. I think it's a very dynamic group, diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives, and good dialogue through the proposals we've talked about. I think having continuity in that would be better.
Thank you. That's all of the questions. Given that we only had 2 people that were able to make it, we got through it much quicker. So at this point, let me open it up for the council for follow-up. Nothing? All right, gentlemen, thank you very much to both of you for coming and volunteering. And thank you both for your service in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn this, and we will start the council meeting in about 15 minutes at 7:30. Thanks, everyone.
I'm ready to start baseball.
If you can just man that door.
Baseball's fun. Read a book.
Sit around.
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
Fantastic.
And
No boots
the
required.
heat's working. Thank you.
She's working it from her phone there. She's making it hotter.
It works well.
It's always been this time. I would ask.
No, I just asked her to turn it up. Well, I first, it was cold.
When I first sat down to be, you know,
Yeah.
at like 5:45, 5:50, whatever that was. It was blowing hot air on me then. It was like stifling.
My
Like that.
Well, and that's what's coming out right now.
that in itself is not representing conflict, but if people choose to recuse themselves, they can.
You're getting good.
Right.
Not gonna need me very much
We'll
anymore.
go to law school next.
You can't start a car. You should not.
Well, you've been technically meeting since 5:30, so we certainly could, but you're just a minute away now. I've got 7:29, Mayor.
I would use the title sometimes for personal, sometimes for professional, and just that I saw this one, so I saw it. Probably something. This is the first one, so I haven't even looked through it.
And you saw you have a pile
Even
of
the
speaker requests for open forum?
maybe there's good reading through it here. Smart irrigation.
Yeah, I like it. Very
Sorry, Ann. It was my fault.
Just like a regular office, half the office is too cold, half the honest.
Person to spin the wheel.
Well, we knew you'd charge us extra.
Oh, that's
for it.
right, yeah. Funny.
Okay, I call to order the 13 March 2017 meeting of the Victoria City Council. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Lori, on the agenda, any changes?
Mayor, I would recommend that before you adopt the agenda, you remove the claims roster from the consent agenda and take that item up separately following the consent agenda.
Okay, any other items?
No, sir.
All right, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, we adopted the agenda with the change stated. Next is the open forum. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the council. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. We have 5 speakers. The first is Josh Mullaville, if I pronounce that right. Is Josh here? Please step up and state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Josh Mulvihill, and my address is 5720 Marsh Lake Road. My driveway's right on that road. Thank you, council members, for taking the time to hear us, and thank you, Kara, for all your work on this project. I'm speaking both on my behalf and for those that live on the road itself. We, along with everybody else there, would like to see a paved road. But we would like to see a responsible paved road that both balances our current needs as well as the future needs as we project out into the distance. Kara stated at the workshop that a 2-lane road is adequate until 2040, and that's with numbers that are inflated in the traffic projections themselves. So I have a question for the council. As it is proposed, this 130-foot right-of-way, 4 lanes, potentially with a median, why build a road that we don't need in the very near future or for at least decades with money that the city does not currently have? Currently, we have 300 cars per day that travel down our road, which averages 1 car per every 5 minutes. If you have not been out to Marsh Lake Road, I would like to invite you to drive down that road so that you could actually see it is a very, very rural road. And right now we're dealing with a dead-end rural road. It comes to a T, and 45% of what you heard from the projections are completely dependent upon a development that happens from Tellers Road that may very well never happen. And so even all those high numbers. A 2-lane undivided road can handle 12,700 cars per day, according to the Met Council forecast. So that is every single resident in Victoria driving on Marsh Lake Road every single day. That's their current forecast. That seems highly unlikely to me, just as a non-road engineer. So we asked this council to build a road that is responsible, and we asked this council to build a road that does not have a median. We think that's part of what responsible means. It's not needed, and it's problematic for all of us that live on this road, especially if there is no access to turn both ways. I don't want to live, for however long we live on that road, having to drive a mile, make a U-turn, or wherever the turn is to go east. This has been sold to us as residents for 2 reasons. For aesthetic purposes. And this does not carry much weight to us because in order to get this aesthetic purpose, we have to cut down our trees and all the aesthetic nature that is around that makes our Road, which has been said by many to be one of the most beautiful roads in the city itself. And with that, we have been told that the median would have landscaping on that. And I do want to point out for the council that landscaping, the pictures that were presented as misleading. They can only be so high, the trees, because of the root system that would then disturb the road itself. So what we get in the actual median is short trees or shrubs. And to us, that's not aesthetically pleasing, nor does it create this kind of sense of place that we've been told that we would have. So I just want to point that out to the council. Second, we are told that we need a median for a calming feel to slow traffic. We have that already to a degree with our hills and our curves. So why straighten out a road and flatten it to make it fast and then create a median? We would like to see that maintained, and that gets that calming feel that we and everybody else already desires. We also request that a responsible speed limit be placed on this road that recognizes that we have driveways on it and recognizes that we have children that live on this road. I have 5 young children, and I don't want to have to be potentially thinking that my children are going to be harmed every time they go out the front door and are playing in their front yard. And we also, you'll hear from some farmers on this road, that's very problematic to have those speeds and the median on that road. And I will end with that. Thank you all.
Thank you. Next speaker, Jeremy Rock.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Rock. I also live on Marsh Lake Road, 5925 Marsh Lake Road, just to the west of the Hunt Club's entry driveway. First of all, again, thank you very much for allowing us to talk to you. And definitely thank you to Kara and Ben for the time that they've spent listening to us and conversing with us on this project. In summary, I just want to make a couple statements that we all agree that the current roadway is in need of improvement due to the increased residential traffic which is being generated by the development along Marsh Lake Road, and that if everything goes as planned, will continue to grow as that development happens and grows to the other side of Marsh Lake Road in the future. The critical points that are the problems that need to be fixed on Marsh Lake Road started out to be 3 things. Number 1, we've agreed with the township to pave that road once we've gotten to a certain amount of development, and that pavement also, as was mentioned in the workshop by Councilman Vogt, was mentioned in a website or an email called nextdoor.com, where one resident who was a brand new resident of the new developments had said, hey, can we get this thing paved? Can we do it tomorrow? So we had to have a very brief discussion about, unless he wanted to pay for the whole thing, it was going to take some time. Secondly, the route of the road needs to be improved, both in its horizontal and vertical alignment. But as Josh mentioned, some of those features, we don't want to lose them and make this into a straight line highway that actually encourages people to break whatever speed limit is on it and go faster. It would be nice to keep those natural, at least horizontal alignment features in there as much as possible as a traffic calming feature of the road, even though the vertical alignments are more of the issue of safety. And third, the speed of travel on the road needs to be regulated in some form, and we've understood up to this point that Minnesota DOT sets speed limits, but we've seen examples in surrounding cities where some of those cities or townships have posted other speed limits, and there's some discussion about whether those are enforceable, but it at least is a posted speed limit which helps affect the actual travel speed on the road. These main goals are the whole reason why Marsh Lake Road initially needed to be done. Where this project seems to have gotten off track is that the scope of the road has now grown by many multiples, and it appears that when the city approached the county for input on a joint powers agreement, the goals may have completely changed, and I think that's what's causing all of the other details that we've discussed at length. The goals of the current road are motivated by an outdated and inaccurate comprehensive plan, which again we talked about in the workshop, and a couple examples of those outdated assumptions that I believe are very critical. One very critical is that SRF mentioned in their presentation to us on February 28th that their assumption in their model was that 43, which is at the west end of Marsh Lake Road, was unimproved in the modeling that they did to determine the 14,700 or 400 or 500, depending on which model we're looking at. that was said to be going down Marsh Lake Road in the future. That means that there was no improvement to the intersection of 43 and 10, which if you've ever driven that, you'll notice it's already very dangerous to turn left from 43 onto 10. And that is, in fact, the reason why much of the traffic that comes down Marsh Lake Road that does not live on Marsh Lake Road goes that way. So the argument could be made that assumption in itself causes a lot of the traffic to come down in the model, in the computer model, and that needs to be revised and probably needs to be prioritized for safety. A second thing to mention was that the county plans on Marsh Lake Road expanding, which again we need to step back and look at that from a bigger picture standpoint in the model, and we would like to know when the county's model is created with SRF, when the inputs from the city are expected to be given to the county for that model or to SRF for that model. The way that I understand what's been explained to me by Lyndon Robgent was that the cities are asked for input in order to put that data on population growth into the model. And we would like to be able to be involved in that process to know what numbers are being given and what logic was put into where that development would go. Again, all of these assumptions, as well as other things that have been mentioned by Josh and that I'm sure will be mentioned by other residents, have led to a road design which far exceeds any realistic projections for growth in this area for the next 3 to 4 decades. We have to assume that revisions that will be coming from the new comp plan process, which is just starting, will help to govern the expectations on this project, and we'd like to see those numbers taken into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Julie Schmig.
Hi, can you hear me okay, or should I pull it down?
Pull it down. You can pull it down.
All right, here we go. All right, I'm Julie Schmeek, 5475 Marsh Lake Road, and I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Schmeeg Hilltop Farm on Marsh Lake Road and the proposed improvements for Marsh Lake Road. I'll start with a little history. Our family has farmed this land since 1853, and it's some of the most beautiful and richest farmland you will find anywhere. When the glaciers receded 10,000 years ago, they left behind a landscape of rolling hills, tranquil lakes, ponds, marshes, and creeks, and a deep, rich topsoil. That's why Carver County was called the Dairy Belt, along with the historic Grimm Farm at Carver Park. This is good land, and it has provided for my family for 164 years. 164 years and counting. Farming is not a lifestyle, it's a life. It has an essential place in Victoria's heritage, and my family hopes to continue farming this land into the future. We're in it for the long haul. As we look to the future, we realize there are changes on the horizon. More and more people are drawn to the rural appeal of our area, and more people naturally bring more traffic. The proposed improvements for Marsh Lake Road are intended to meet the needs of a changing landscape. But do we need to change the landscape? Or can we find a way to blend the contours and scenery of our rural landscape with a road that gets people to where they want to go while still being practical and safe for farming and for everyone who travels the road? At the workshop earlier this evening, you were presented with a proposal for Marsh Lake Road for a 2-lane road that included a 41-foot wide center median. From a farming perspective, we are opposed to that design. A median would effectively create a physical barrier that would split our farm in two. Our farm is on both sides of Marsh Lake Road, and we also farm land at Marsh Lake Hunting Preserve. A median would impede our ability to easily access our fields in a safe manner. In order to navigate a divided road with farm equipment, especially left turns, you need space. A tractor, baler, and hay wagon together can exceed the length of a typical fire truck. Combines are a whole nother story. Medians create a tightness to turning that are not farm-friendly and require us to make U-turns with large equipment that are both impractical and unsafe. A landscape median would also create a visual barrier for safe farming practices. During my family's long history of farming here, we have always been able to visualize the entire farm, north and south fields, from the farmhouse and barns. A landscape median would block our ability to see the tractors working in the fields and block those in the field from seeing the harvesting activities going on by the barns, silos, and corn bins. Farming can be a hazardous occupation, and the ability to watch the workers in the field is crucial to safety. Another safety concern we have for the road is the speed limit. We would like to see a rural speed limit assigned to this road so that cars and tractors can all get along. To wrap things up, there's something else compelling to note here. The folks who currently call Marsh Lake Road home came during 3 different centuries, some in the 1800s, some in the 1900s, and some since 2000. That's 3 different centuries and 3 very different times in history. Yet, what we all have in common as neighbors is that we found along Marsh Lake Road a very special sense of place, a place where we feel at home in the country, a place to raise a family. And we're finding that we are all in it for the long haul. As we look to the future, Victoria has a great opportunity to preserve a very unique place along Marsh Lake Road. So thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Stensland?
Hello, thank you. I am Scott Stensland, and you asked me to follow Julie. That's tough. I also live on Marsh Lake Road, and I'd like to share a couple of my thoughts and a couple of concerns. I'm going to try not to touch on anything that anybody else has earlier. My understanding, this updated redesign of Marsh Lake Road is really part of the Victoria 2030 comprehensive plan. Marsh Lake Road was identified as being a larger part of a thoroughfare that will carry many cars, basically connecting up with Pioneer Road in Eden Prairie, traveling through Chanhassen to Chaska, meets up at the intersection of County Road 11. Somewhat follows that footprint that we've talked about, where the existing Marsh Lake Road, and then continuing on past I call it a dead end. There's no western travel from that intersection of 43, but continuing on to Waconia. My first concern is that original plan, for that 2030 plan for this high-capacity thoroughfare, if it's even possible, where we stand today with what we know. As Carver County pointed out earlier, the initial design of this corridor planned for a bridge to be built in Chaska that would allow for this increased traffic to cross over the Twin Cities and Western Railway, the railroad that is basically at the intersection of Pioneer Trail and Bavaria. That's not going to happen. That corridor has basically been stopped in Chaska. Any thought of travel from that Eden Prairie to Waconia is done. It's not going to happen. Pioneer Trail, less than 1 mile from Marsh Lake Road, has basically, essentially, been turned into a 2-lane with shoulder neighborhood road. Less than 1 mile from Marsh Lake Road. I question the scope of the entire project with that bottleneck there. My second concern is the continuation of Marsh Lake Road off to Waconia. Part of that is acquiring private land. It's development to the area based on population, what grows out there. The 2030 plan that this was all based on, Met Council had an estimate for the year 2030 of 28,000 residents in Victoria. 28,000 residents. This is old news. This is not accurate. The Met Council has published their Thrive Minneapolis St. Paul 2040 forecast. In this forecast, the new 2030 projection for Victoria is 12,600 residents. This plan was based off 28,000, a population forecast of 28,000. The new one, the updated, is 12,600. The 2040 plan, which we didn't have back then, or an estimate, is at 15,400. So almost half of what that road was based off of. The numbers, they just don't support that growth west to Waconia for 25 to 30 years, possibly never. That, to me, puts doubt in this long-range plan. Just to kind of sum it up, I mentioned earlier when I got to speak in front of the council when I was interviewing for the 2040 Comprehensive Plan Committee. It's a super interesting time in Victoria right now. Our 2030 plan is essentially obsolete. It's coming to the end of its life. The Met Council, as I showed, it's updated its 2030 plan to 2040. We're about to do that, and I couldn't be more excited to be part of that. My question to you all is, why would a project of such scope and importance to this city and the county be based on this? It's just old, outdated information. And I urge you all to reconsider this project and reconsider the prioritization of this project within Victoria and Carver County. Thanks. And I forgot, thank you for all your hard work. Kara has been awesome with all this.
Thank you. One more request, Lawrence Gooby.
Thank you. Mayors, council members. Lawrence Gooby, live at 7848 Bavaria Road, and to be very brief, I request that the specific item of a payment to Hoff-Berry, PA, in the amount of $9,572 be pulled from the claims roster and considered independently by the council. Thank you.
Okay, any other speakers? All right. Next item, visitors presentation.
I have a summary of what we have presented. Could I give each person a copy?
Yeah, if you can hand them to Kara, Jeremy, and we'll get them out. Thank you. Mayor, we do have one visitor's presentation tonight. Mark Hubner, who is the owner of the to-be-opened Noble Lion Restaurant in the Main Street building, is here with us this evening.
Hello, everyone. Really not sure, wasn't given a lot of information on what to tell you, but I know the town's kind of buzzing about what's going on in that corner over there in Unit 105. So I'm here, obviously, to request a off-sale or on-sale liquor license for the full week and Sunday.
I'm sorry, let me interrupt.
Yeah.
For the record, could you state your name and your address?
I'm sorry, first time doing this. I'm Mark Hibner. My address is 948 Gusty Drive in Waconia. The restaurant address is 7940 Victoria Drive.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So what I'm opening is really just a small European-style bistro, 50 seats, looking to bring some authentic European and mid-American fare to the neighborhood here. As you know, the pickings are pretty slim, lots of burgers in town and deep-fried food, so I'm looking to change that, maybe create a date-night destination for the more adult and mature crowd, if you will. I just want it to become kind of a neighborhood place where people can come, and I'll have my group of regulars. I love that the apartments are being built across the street because that's built-in customers right there for me. So, yeah, I'm looking to become part of this community. My girls grew up playing hockey over at the Victoria Ice Arena there, so if I can, I want to get a billboard up there that says the Noble Lion on it and try to support the city in any other way possible through the car show, or I can't do the Lions this year because I'm hoping to open right there in beginning of May. So that's really what it is. Fire away with the questions if you want.
Well, first off, thank you. Welcome to Victoria. I wish you well. Council, questions?
Thank you and welcome.
Thanks and welcome.
Well, thank you.
Good luck. Have you got a preliminary menu?
We have a long list of... Give me your email and I'll send you the list of items. We have a long list of items, and I'm this close to hiring a chef. So once we get that underway, then I'll start posting. I post on Facebook, and the city so generously reposts some of my stuff, so you can follow all the information there. But as we get closer, it's going to be go time, so I better have a menu ready to go, huh?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is the consent agenda. Based on the modified agenda, the claims roster has been pulled off. Council, is there anything else on the consent agenda that anybody wants to pull off or discuss? If not, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second motion. This is with the $9,572 invoices pulled off.
The entire claims roster is pulled off.
Okay. Yes. I'll second the motion.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none. That passes unanimously. We'll now take up the claims roster. As previously discussed in a prior council meeting, 3 members of the council, myself included, cannot approve the invoice that's in question. With the exception of that invoice, can I have a motion, if there's no discussion by the council, can I have a motion to approve the claims roster excluding the Hoff invoice?
I'll make a motion to approve the claim roster excluding the Hoff invoice.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, claims roster is approved minus the one item. Okay, Bob, at that point, do we need to table that specific invoice, or is that just automatically tabled as further discussions occur?
Well, Mayor and Council, our view hasn't really changed on that from the last meeting. As we indicated then, we didn't necessarily need action on that one item. It is not time sensitive. If you wanted to table it, of course, tabling implies that you're going to bring it back for consideration at some date certain. So I guess it's up to council if you want to do it that way, or if you want to simply move on. You're not required, of course, if you've pulled something off the claims roster and you don't want to act on it, you're not required to make a motion at all on it.
Well, I don't think we can table it, given the fact that we don't know when we'll have a quorum to discuss it. So let's just move on. The next item then is new business. Lori?
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier this evening, the City Council held interviews for the Finance and Planning Commission meeting. The next item would be for the City Council to consider appointment to those committees and commissions. There are currently 2 vacancies to the Planning Commission. That is a 3-year term for each of those positions. That would be effective April 1st, 2017. And for the Finance Committee, and I apologize, I'm describing these in the reverse order that you interviewed. There are up to 3 openings. We have typically had 2 or 3 citizen representatives on the Finance Committee. We would be looking for up to 2 appointments to a 2-year term and 1 appointment to a 1-year term in an attempt to get some staggering back into that committee. There is one applicant that, there were several applicants that were not able to be interviewed, but there is one applicant that had some crossover, would first like to be considered for the Finance Committee, and second like to be considered for the Planning Commission, which is why the interviews were ordered, Finance Committee first and Planning Commission second. I'd suggest that you do your discussion of appointments in the same manner.
All right, thank you. Since we interviewed Finance Committee, let's go ahead and do that first. At this point, let me open it up for the council for discussion.
I think we should have continuity, so inviting Greg Ivansky back to the Finance Committee makes a lot of sense, especially because of his expertise in capital markets and the fact that interest rates are starting to move. And I think it's a smart thing to do.
1-year or 2-year terms, what are you suggesting?
2-year term.
Other council members, comments on Greg?
Excuse me, Lori, was that 1 or 3? What was the terms available?
2 2-years and 1 1-year.
No, 2 3 years and 2, is it?
That's what I was
Sorry, the Finance Committee and the Planning Commission are different. So the Finance Committee is 2 2-year terms and 1 1-year term.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. I would also support that selection, and a 2-year term would be appropriate for Greg.
I agree.
I had an opportunity to watch Greg at one Finance Committee, and I was very impressed with the level of involvement that Greg had, given the fact that he's been here since 2009 and weathered some pretty tough economical times. I would support Greg as well.
All right, I think it's unanimous on Greg for a 2-year term. Next candidate, I'd like to see Joe Doherty, 8-year resident, CPA, CFO in a company, new to city volunteers, but I think he's qualified and wants to give back. I'd like to see Joe Doherty nominated to a 2-year term. Comments?
Quite frankly, I'd like to just thank everybody that did the interview. I was pretty much in awe at the quality and caliber of everybody involved, not only today but last week as well for the Comp Steering Committee. And quite frankly, I'm a little bit humbled that I have to select somebody. But Joe Doherty seemed perfectly qualified as well.
I can't support Joe.
Would you care to provide a reason?
No.
Any other comments? Councilmember Striegel, Councilmember Vogt, Joe Doherty.
Decline. Not support.
I'd like to come back, discuss all the candidates.
Okay.
I would like to bring your attention to John Carlson, who's been on the Park and Rec Commission for a good number of years and has served in executive capacity in business. Also, he's been hanging around City Hall here for meeting after meeting for months and months. He's really starting to pick up on how this place can be efficient and where we can work as a team. He was also very vocal in this whole controversy on the Xcel Energy wires in the streets, and was one of the most prolific and articulate people that came forward and helped us find a solution. So I think he'd be a really good member of the Finance Committee.
I think John's contributions to the Park and Rec and his orientation to kind of the city matters in that respect, as well as working with various nonprofits and the Cancer Society, et cetera, as well as being a HOA board member, make him very well-rounded, and I would also support his nomination.
I support John.
I support John as well. I've had an opportunity to meet and get to know John a little bit through the Park and Rec. He's always been extremely fair, extremely neutral, but not afraid to speak his mind as well. I think he's been instrumental on that Park and Rec, and now that I'm on the Park and Rec as well, I'd hate to lose him, but he's definitely would be a wonderful addition to the Finance Committee.
1 year or 2 year?
I could support 2 years.
2 years.
Preference?
Yeah, I can. No preference. I can support that.
Okay. Another candidate, Christopher Bernander. All right. Well, I'll support him. CPA for 14 years, wants to give back. Resident here. Just like Joe Doherty, he's another supporter of ours. He's helped us before. Is there any other support for him?
I can't support him.
And I don't know Christopher personally. He seemed perfectly qualified. And I'm just like I said, we have all great candidates, and I certainly could support Christopher for a 1 year term.
Councilmember Striegel?
Seemed like a very nice guy. I think, again, lots of good choices, which makes it hard. But I think Derek Gunderson, with a background with an MPA, public administration, Park and Rec, Planning Commission, has a depth of experience, and that is more appealing as we go through as we move into or continue in some pretty complex times. He's also what's the word? Not negotiator, but a mediator. And so I think in terms of trying to bring people together to a common position, I think he has a skill set there that is unique and differentiated.
You did see the email from the one residents reference his candidates? No, I'm sorry, that's related to the Planning Commission. Never mind. Others on Derek Gunderson for Finance?
Yeah, I would support Derek.
I would support Derek.
So that's 3?
Personally, I could not support Derek.
Neither can I. The 1 year or 2 year?
I think we only have a 1 year left.
Correct.
Okay. So for the record then, it apparently is going to be Derek Gunderson for 1 year, Greg Avansky.
Could we call for a vote between Christopher and Derek?
Correct, but For the record, John Iverson, Christopher Bernander, and Joe Doherty all know me, and I've spoke with them many times prior to becoming mayor, and they're my supporters. I think it's clear that this council is not going to support those people. Given that we have stated by council members John Carlson, Greg Evansky, and Derek Gunderson each have 3 votes, I don't think there's any further benefit in debating if council members have decided already. Any other further comment, questions? Okay, then can I have a motion to appoint John Carlson, Greg Evansky to 2-year terms on the Finance Committee and Derek Gunderson to a 1-year term on the Finance Committee?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. No. Let the record reflect that Mayor Funk voted no. The other 4 council members voted yes.
Let the record also show that I don't keep track of the mayor's social circles and have no idea who he chooses to socialize with, and therefore attributing motives to my vote would be incorrect.
So noted. All right. The Planning Commission interviews. Councilmember Vogt, do you want to start?
I'm very impressed with current Planning Commissioner Craig East. I have worked with him. I worked with him on the comp plan task force in 2008, 2009. He was integral to that. I've worked with him since he's been a planning commissioner. I think some of his answers in his resume on things he sees most pressing related to Victoria were very much on. I just think he should continue his work.
I would agree. Mr. Krakis has, I've been able to watch Mr. Krakis conduct himself at the Planning Commission meetings. He's grown to be, I would consider him somewhat of a leader on that group. He's a former city planner. I think he's instrumental in bringing that Planning Commission along, and I certainly would support renominating.
Other comments?
Tom impressed the whole council 2 years ago when he came in with a very strong resume and fantastic credentials at that time, and I think that continuity of Tom's time on the Planning Council will serve the city well.
I agree. And I would add that Jeff Enevold to that too, that something about having a former sheriff on the Planning Commission seems like a good thing. I would support them both.
I would support that as well.
As would I.
As do I. Given that we have,
As do I.
it's unanimous. May I have a motion to approve Jeff Envold and Tom Krakis? I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong.
Krakis.
Krakis.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Those 2 are appointed unanimously. Okay. Year-end transfers. Lori?
Thank you, Mayor. The Finance Director, Kelly Grinnell, is with us this evening to go over an item that we cover around this time each year, which is some year-end transfers and assigned fund balance.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're preparing for our annual audit. The auditors will be in next week, so in preparation for that, we're closing out our books. And one of the things we do is we look at our year-end balances for the general fund. And one of the things we do is we look at what we have for unassigned fund balance. And the council set a goal of having a 30% unassigned fund balance each year. That 30% is 30% of the following year's expenditures. So in looking at what is that 30%, it's 30% of the 2017 general fund expenditures. So based on that, we should have an unassigned fund balance of roughly $1,162,199. Right now, we actually have about $254,000 more than that. And that's a result of a budget surplus. And there are a few reasons for that budget surplus. Probably the biggest reason is that we didn't spend about $82,500 that we budgeted for the comp plan and the AUAR. The AUAR is the Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review that we had planned for the Marsh Lake Road area for the development. That's money that we will be spending, so what we're proposing is to set that aside. So it will be spent, but that's a large bulk of it. We also realized from some savings from wages and benefits, particularly for the fire department. As you may remember, we delayed the hiring of Chief Hager a little bit. We also did not spend as much on paid on-call hours for volunteer firefighters. We also realized quite a bit in savings in street maintenance on seal coating. As you know, fuel costs are down quite a bit, and because of that, seal coating costs were down. We also realized about $18,000 in fuel costs in the year. We realized about $20,000 in snow removal costs due to the mild winter. We had about $17,000 in salary savings in all of our other departments throughout the year, largely due to turnover. And then in looking at revenues that we had from other areas other than building permits, we had about $46,000 in additional revenues. So if you add all that up, that's why we have this additional $254,000 that we need to do something with in order to get to a 30% unassigned fund balance. So there's two ways we can deal with it. We can assign a portion of it, and or we can transfer a portion of it. So the first thing I'd like to go through is the recommended fund assignment. So in looking at the chart that was in the packet, I'll just briefly go through the changes and the non-changes. For employee insurance, we're recommending to keep that at $25,000. This is to it's a contingency against any large health insurance premiums.
Excuse me, Kelly, on that one. So we set aside $25,000 last year, and did we spend that money, or
We didn't spend any of it, so it'd just be keeping that in assigned fund balance.
so was it considered part of that surplus then, that we're now reassigning it back to that, or are we adding another $25,000 to that?
No, this is just keeping it intact and not changing it. So we're not changing the amount of the assignment. So it's
Didn't spend it last year, we're holding it over and keeping it for this year.
so anything in assigned fund balance that's not changing, there's no effect on unassigned fund balance. If we change the amount of assigned fund balance, then it does affect the $254,000 amount.
Okay, thanks.
The next line item down is that the amount for the comp plan, the AUAR, we're recommending putting the full amount in there. We will likely spend that full amount, and then we do have an additional amount budgeted in 2017 for completion of that. The next two items down, the codification of the ordinances and the city clerk's salary, those two items were completed in 2016, so those are gone now. Next item down is the city hall microphones and security updates. We're proposing to set aside $10,000 to spend in 2017. That would be to add for recording meetings, and then to add a couple more
card access readers.
Yes, for a couple of doors that do not have those. The warning siren is something we did budget in 2017. However, we did indicate in the budget that we would have the money set aside in assigned fund balance for that. Record scanning is something that we have kept in assigned fund balance. We have not done this yet, but we'll just continue to keep it in there until we finish out that project. The finance intern is something we budgeted in 2016. However, we didn't hire an intern until late in the year, so that's to finish out that with that position. Fire relief pension for $10,000, that is to set aside in the event that we would be faced with a large bill in the event that we would need to have a required contribution. Typically, we are not required to contribute, but it's just in the event that we would. The PTO conversion / severance. This is a set aside for the city's accrued sick leave liability. The city has a policy that was in effect for some of our current employees. If they are here long enough, they will be paid for a portion of their accrued sick leave. So the $42,000 represents the amount that we would be liable for in the event they do stay here long enough. So the goal would be to continue to fund that fully. And then the last item is a set aside, a contingency for legal expenses. This would be for anything above and beyond what we have currently budgeted. We had this amount set aside last year, and we did not need to dip into it. So,
Is this specific to the open meeting lawsuits?
I would say yes.
Okay. I'm going to recuse myself from voting on that item. Bob, given that this is not a claims roster and it's within the whole group, can I vote to, assuming when we get to that point, vote to approve all the other fund transfers but recuse myself from that line item?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I guess I'd look to staff to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the answer is probably no. I mean, I think as a general matter, when you do budgeting and when you do subsets of budgeting, like approving balance assignments out of your budget or out of your reserve money at the end of the year, that's a package you're approving, and I think the parts move together. That said, lather on for another 30 seconds, when you do budgeting, you are not authorizing particular expenditures. You're simply doing an accounting exercise to set forth plans for possible expenditures. And the fact of the matter is, expenditures by the council or by the city staff benefit everybody in the city, presumably. I mean, city expenditures benefit the city. You benefit the city, individual residents in the city, to one extent or another, greater extent or a lesser extent. I've never had a city, and I'm not familiar with any case law that would suggest to the contrary, that you have to recuse yourself or not participate in a budgeting process simply because particular line items impact you financially more than others do. I mean, that's just an exercise that comes.
So you're saying that I can vote on this without a conflict?
Yeah.
Okay.
For summarizing what I was saying in a lawyer way. Yeah.
Just want to make sure we're doing this right. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Kelly, continue.
Okay. So overall, we're recommending an increase of $106,400 over the previous year's assignment, with the bulk of that coming from the comp plan and AUAR set aside. So that covers the assignment portion of the $254,000 budget surplus.
Quick question on that, on the
Sure.
last one. In my previous time on Finance Committee, I know we had the legal expense fee covered things like litigation over easement access and other things that were broader in nature. I guess I would assume
That assigned fund balance is generally intended to cover legal expenses that would be outside of what we've budgeted through the general fund. As you're all aware, sometimes our budgeting cycles don't follow current events, and so while I think Kelly's answer that it was related to the open meeting law or could be is fair, it's also fair to say that we have used a fund balance, set aside legal expense fund balance for other cases, and there might be other legal expenses that we're not presently aware of. The point of assigned fund balance in many cases is to not encounter an emergency situation, because you do have some money set aside for potential situations you may encounter.
So Bob, am I allowed to comment on this?
You are.
Am I allowed to? Yeah, so specifically to legal expenses, the first time I saw it used was as part of my tenure with the Finance Committee, and it had to do with the litigation of the Traxler
Correct.
property. Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so the second way to deal with the budget surplus and to get down to that 30% unassigned fund balance is to do a transfer out to another fund. And so staff is recommending that the council approve transfers out. And so, as you may remember, the council has already done one transfer out, and that was a transfer to the Revenue Stabilization Fund. However, that was for accelerated building permit revenues. So these would be additional transfers. And typically, we have done transfers only to the Long-Term Street Maintenance Fund. However, for this, staff is recommending a second transfer, and that would be a one transfer to the Long-Term Street Maintenance Fund, and that would be for $122,742 to the Long-Term Street Maintenance Fund, and then a $25,000 transfer to the Fire Department Capital Equipment Fund. And part of the reason for that is that they did not spend everything in their budget for the year. They were about $43,000 under budget for the year. And then in looking at their capital equipment needs, for the coming years, they are a little short in what they have coming up. So those were the two recommendations. We did discuss this at the Finance Committee meeting held at 5 o'clock, and there was consensus on those transfers. So I think I'll pause here, since everything I've talked about thus far relates to general fund transfers, and take any questions.
So while I absolutely think long-term street maintenance fund is an appropriate priority, are there any funds that have projected deficits, or are, I think you mentioned the fire department, but other than that, are there any funds that have projected shortfalls versus necessary expenditures? And specifically, I'm thinking about, would this be better to, for example, pay off or pay down the interfund loan for the 13.5 acres from the water treatment plant, or some of the other debt that we have to retire that, or in some way reduce that, rather than put it into an account if those accounts are adequately funded today?
Well, I've just gone through all of our different funds and looked at our long-term projections, and we are in good shape in terms of meeting most our capital needs. So I don't really see a need in any other fund, any immediate need.
When's the water fund?
2019.
It's paid off, and how
Yes.
much are we paying a year on that?
It's $125,000 this year, and then $150,000 each year in 2018 and 2019. So there is a scheduled repayment date for each of those years.
So the only
Accelerates it a year.
Well, accelerates it a year, but that's $2 million in debt service.
True.
And we're looking at a need to build a road, and options are always good.
Well, that's street maintenance fund.
Street maintenance really never ends.
No,
and we keep adding streets year after year after year.
I understand that, and I guess what I'm offering, or I'm asking, I'm not offering, I'm asking, is there a benefit in having the option of paying that off a year early?
I guess when I look at the long-term projections for the funds, the one that does go negative eventually is the long-term street maintenance fund, and that is because of the overlays that ramp up in about 2025, depending upon when we need to do them and if we can delay them. And
Didn't we adjust the budgets last fall to make sure that they didn't go negative? Or did that assume this was occurring?
well, we've adjusted them, and there is some question about how do we have to do them all in this year, or can we wait a few years? But we have a lot of them that are going to hit in the mid-2020s. So that's why I think it's important to continue to shore up this fund.
Did you by chance put this in and run the scenario as far as does it keep it from going negative, or how far does it delay it? If we make
If we
122,742.
Well, I mean, 122,742 is not going to make a significant. It's not going to be critical, but it's just something to keep in mind with this fund, that with the number of overlays we have coming due, in the mid-2020s, that this is a fund that we're going to want to continue to keep our eye on.
Council, I'd also remind you that the street maintenance fund is not a legally obligated balance. So if your priorities or needs changed significantly in the future, this money could be reprioritized. You're not making a decision that you can't go back on at some future date should you need to.
Yeah, it's easy then.
Okay. Got it.
That's true. It's not restricted in any way.
Okay, council, further questions? Okay, do we have a resolution number here? 17-16. Can I have a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution approving the fund balance assignment and transfers for year-end 2016.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Okay, Lori, next item, MCWD grant agreement.
Thank you, Mayor. As you'll recall, last fall, City Council, we applied in concert with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District for a grant to enhance our downtown stormwater pond. Very pleased this evening to officially report that we did receive those grant funds. That's $262,520 that the city will be able to use to enhance our downtown stormwater project. And this item was added to the agenda earlier today. The reason that we are adding it is that the city engineer, Kara Guerin, is the main staff contact for this project. She will not be at the next meeting. She's going to give you a brief staff report. If council is comfortable acting on the grant agreement this evening, that's wonderful. It's not necessary. We could act on it at the March 27th meeting, but I did want you to have the opportunity to directly ask the city engineer any questions that you have.
Point of order. Given that this was added late, do we have any issues related to the open meeting law and providing notice in time?
Mayor and Council, I guess I didn't understand that it was on your proposed agenda. I think you voted to approve the agenda, though, with that addition. And the only time I get worried about adding things to your agenda is if there are rights of citizens or rights of other folks that might be compromised by not having gotten notice. This is not one of those things.
So we should be fine. Okay, I just wanted to check. Kara, if you would.
Council members, Lori did a nice job of summarizing the overall exciting good news, but I do just want to refresh everybody's memory on what the scope of the project is. So this is from a presentation that we provided to the City Council last fall when you approved the overall agreement with Minnehaha Creek. But the proposal is to enhance the city's stormwater ponds that are located on the kind of west side of Highway 5, on the south side of the road, adjacent to the Three Rivers, not the Three Rivers Park, but the trail that runs through downtown. So our existing stormwater pond facilities are located in this area. They were constructed in 2003 under old watershed district rules. Completing this project would improve the ponds to meet current watershed district standards, which is useful for anything that redevelops within the yellow area. Additionally, water flowing from Church into Auburn, which is up over here, would be benefited by this enhanced treatment as well. So the district took the lead on completing preliminary analysis for us and applied for the grant because we weren't eligible to apply for the grant directly, and we received word that we received it. So once we approve the grant agreement, we'll work on issuing an RFP for the preliminary design and then bring that back for approval with the intent to have construction completed this year. With that, I'll take any questions.
Council?
Is this filtering, iron enhanced filtration, is that a sand filter with iron? How does that work? Just briefly.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
So I noticed there was a change order related to the new city parking lot behind off Rose Street. And my recollection was that there was some filtration, storm, rain garden kind of features to that. And I saw that the change order reduced the cost of that project. Were those removed from there, and is that related to this, or how do those pieces fit together?
So originally, I don't think I have a picture of that. Originally, early in the concept development for that parking lot, we were looking at doing stormwater management on the site. And so we originally saw some examples of some rain gardens or other features that could be included. We very quickly realized that dealing with meeting the revised stormwater rules on a site-by-site basis within downtown would really not be the best approach to water quality. So worked with the district to come up with this alternative idea. So it is related to the project, but not related to the specific change order. The change order had more to do with, we had a significant savings on that project, but if you recall, there's 2 phases to the project. So some of the work that got removed from this current phase will be included in the subsequent phase that will be coming back to the council for approval. The project was approved fairly late in the year, and we ran out of weather to get everything completed. So some of that work is shifting to the next phase of the project.
So we approved that sort of budget year by budget year?
Yeah, we have an overall project budget that we're operating under for that one, and we're still well within that. But this project would have needed to be funded partially out of stormwater utility funds, but now we have grant dollars to pay for it. So
when you net it all out, where are we?
Under budget. And we will have a report on that once we have the updated cost estimate for the Phase 2 improvements, which we should be getting soon. From our
favorite words.
design
Thank you.
consultant. Yes.
What does this, exactly what does this buy us? I mean, does this protect us for the next 10 years, or does it, what does it do specifically? What are we gaining by doing this?
So everything that all the properties in yellow, if any of them experience any redevelopment now, they won't be required to meet Minnehaha Creek Watershed District rules on a parcel-by-parcel basis. The agreement that you approved back in October provides a framework for those things to be permitted within this project scope. So it's a big benefit to any property redeveloping in that area. Additionally, Auburn has been identified as an impaired water and does have an approved TMDL on it. So this additional water quality treatment will go towards helping reduce the phosphorus loading to Auburn. So that is of broader value than just the downtown projects.
So it helps the lakes.
Yes.
Good.
Yep, excellent. The council, additional comments? Lori, what we need to approve the city agreement? Is there a proposed Motion?
Correct. There is in the packet, we're looking for a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement for Downtown Basin Enhancement Project, and it will be subject to minor revisions by the city attorney. We'll have him take a look at it before it is officially signed.
Can I have that motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement for downtown basin enhancement project, subject to minor revisions by the city attorney.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Okay, next item, reports of the city manager. Lori?
Thank you, Mayor. The one item in the correspondence package I wanted to draw your attention to was a letter of support that we drafted to the Carver County CDA. As you know, the council has spent a fair amount of time considering a potential senior housing project in Victoria, and the CDA is scheduled. Their board will meet this Thursday evening to discuss which projects will become a priority for them in 2017. At our last workshop with the CDA, the council provided direction that staff should draft a letter of support. Not looking for a vote on that based on that direction. This is what we've drafted. I understand there are some of our residents that have been circulating a petition and plan to attend that board meeting on Thursday. I also think it would be appropriate if one or two members of the city council is interested and willing in attending that board meeting. That's something that we can coordinate offline if you'd like.
Well, I did have one comment on it, and it's just, it may be a subtlety, and I don't know, hopefully it's not nitpicking. The second sentence, the City of Victoria is ardently interested in providing this housing style for the residents of our community. And I don't know that we, the city, are necessarily planning to do it. I thought wording something along the lines of seeing this type of housing being developed, or something to say that it's not us doing the development, but that we will work together to facilitate it and make it happen as a priority within the city.
Very agreeable to that change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything
No
else,
other
Lori?
items, Mayor. Thank you.
Bob, anything, city attorney?
Mayor, just of maybe passing interest, I've spent the last several days over at the legislature working on that small cell bill that I think you've heard about in the past, where the small cell companies want to gain rights to use the right-of-way, and city poles and infrastructure in the right-of-way and pay relatively little or nothing for it. That's been hotly contested by cities, and it's been a fascinating process to watch, I'll tell you that. And a lot of movement was made, I think, in the city direction on that. So, and there is no final resolution, but I've been kind of immersed in that, so I'll just give you that update.
Anything else?
No, Mayor, thanks.
Council members? Any reports?
No report, but Mr. City Attorney, I was curious on that small cell bill. If somebody like, and maybe this, Lori, is as much for you as anybody, if I think Chanhassen resident and Representative Joe Hoppe is one of the authors or co-authors of that bill.
Correct.
I'm wondering if he would be willing to come and speak to us and tell us, it's a bit contrary to what I think we would expect, and I know Joe, and doesn't seem, there must be something we're not seeing here, and I wonder if he might be willing to come and speak to the council and talk about his perspective on it.
Yeah, I can certainly ask Representative Hoppe. It is difficult to capture their attention during the legislative session, and I think we may be in a better position at this point with that bill based on some receptive feedback that we've gotten to Representative Hoppe and Senator Osmek, but the point is well taken.
Okay. Mayor, if I may, just because I've heard it now for several days, the argument, the industry argument is, in effect, if you summarize it, 5G, the next advancement in wireless technology, requires having more, they call it densification, more cell sites closer together, lower to the ground. And if a state like Minnesota hasn't opened the door and made it quite, my characterization, easy and inexpensive to be able to install those things, then the investment won't follow into a state like that. Now, whether that's true or not is another subject, but that's sort of the argument, is that Minnesota ought to roll out the red carpet and make it easier for those kinds of technologies to be deployed if you want the investment to follow that.
Is the basic premise on this, and some of the things I read, where they're trying to cover low-density areas that the main towers don't pick up well?
Well, Mayor and Council, I guess I don't know the technology that well, but I know that at least in part what they're looking to hit is not low density. For example, what's really, I think a lot of us on our side of the table, city side of the table, believe maybe driving it is the Super Bowl and wanting to have the best and the, if you will, biggest pipe available in and around the Super Bowl site. That's an example of how that technology would be deployed. So that's not a particularly non-densely populated area. It's a heavily densely
Right.
populated area.
Right.
So.
Got it. Council, any other questions on
Actually,
that?
related to this, it raised an issue, and I think Ben and I talked about it a little bit, and I'd like to bring it back up to council. And it also, I think we discussed it probably 2 or 3 years ago, and that is council consideration amending our code. I think that's the proper procedure, to obligate new developments to include fiber to the doorstep. It just seems like that's something that we should be prepping for now. I know that they've come through in some neighborhoods and put fiber, I think, to the control boxes, but we should be prepping our networks all the way to the doorstep while they're being built. So is that something we can talk about?
You should probably put that on a future
Yeah,
council meeting.
That's what I don't want to talk about it now, no.
Right. Good. Larry, I'm sorry, Lori, would you add that to the list of items, and we'll get it scheduled?
I will.
Okay. Council.
I had,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I had two, they were sort of, I wasn't sure, I didn't want to take the year-end transfer conversation off track, but I did have a couple of questions just to, related to things that were part of that conversation. One is the City Hall microphones and security updates. And I just found myself wondering what we do or how we establish what is the right level of security and make sure that we are appropriate and planning not just for today, but planning forward to keep the staff safe and our facility accessible.
Sure, that's a great question. That item in particular is the security updates is to address 2 doors within City Hall that did not initially receive card access readers when the building was built. And now that we've been in the building a little over 2 years and sort of understand how it functions, it would be very helpful for staff and members of the public if those 2 doors had access readers. So this main door that we use to generally, I would call it sort of our main door to the City Council chambers, that does not have a card access reader, so as you've noticed, we generally have that door propped open because otherwise it's locked and it's got a little sign that says, if this door is locked, please go to the door in the middle, the one that is able to be programmed to be open during the day. I'd like to see that door have a card reader on it so that, you've noticed it can get noisy out in the hallway. We can keep that door closed but still have it unlocked, and residents' first instinct is to approach that door. They'll be able to get in no problem. So I'd like to address what I see as sort of a design flaw there. And we didn't live here. We didn't know how the building was going to work
Sure.
exactly.
Traffic flows, et cetera.
Yep, and that second door would be the one going from the conference room that we use sometimes for closed sessions or work sessions into the main of City Hall. What that would allow us to do is to better control access when we allow the library or another group to use the council chambers after hours. Right now, they can access all of City Hall, which means that we pretty tightly restrict who can use this room, or we have to have a staff person here. If we could have that door locked off, I would feel a lot better about providing access to this room to different groups. The 2 microphones, I'm sorry.
I even noticed during some council sessions that are busy, we have people that are leaving, and
Yep.
we need to lock that.
Yep, and from a practical standpoint, my purse is back in my office, and people have their personal stuff.
Right.
And again, so those specific updates certainly make sense, and that's certainly within your purview, and I appreciate you taking the lead to make those things happen. I think my question was almost a bigger, what do we do as a security audit? Kind of a bigger picture. Do we have the right, not just how well does the building function and work, but on the security side, do we have an appropriately secured facility? And who's is there a third party or somebody that looks at those things that we use?
Well, I think there are multiple levels of that audit, so to speak. There's the building and the infrastructure itself, but then there's the IT infrastructure. And I think Lori and I have had conversations about the IT infrastructure that it's valid to have an audit of both, independent audit.
So I guess just as a footnote going forward, I'd like to see something address that. And then the last question that I had was respect to the PTO conversion / severance fund. I think I recall we changed that policy, so new employees going forward are no longer, and maybe even existing employees were no longer continuing to credit. How does that work today?
Well, the employees that were hired previously are still eligible for a sick leave payout, but people hired after a certain date.
So if there were existing employees and they had, on the date when we made the policy change, does their balance continue to accrue and to increase?
Correct. But it's capped, so, I mean, there's a maximum they can accrue, but
And then for new employees, that policy is no longer in effect?
correct.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, council, any other comments, reports? Okay, I have nothing for the mayor's report, so can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Vote.
Aye.
I get these